The story opens on a cold, moonlit night. A lonely pine tree clings to the side of a jagged cliff, setting a desolate stage for what's about to happen. High atop that peak, two figures stand in the shadows. The air is thick with tension as one man looms over another who's clearly seen better days. On the ground is Jin Soan, battered and bleeding. He's clutching a wound, barely hanging on as he looks up at the man who used to be his leader. Standing over him is Yang Soe, a lord of the Murim alliance. He offers a cold thanks to Jin, acknowledging that thanks to his help, all the alliance's records have finally been restored. Yang Soe is a tall, elegant figure in ornate white robes, his face partially hidden by a black mask. One crimson eye glows with a ruthless light as he looks down at his former subordinate. Jin can only look down in bitter silence. He spent his whole life being a perfect tool, memorizing and restoring everything just because he was told to. He looks up, his face stained with blood and resentment. He asks if this pathetic, dog-like death is really how they plan to repay all his hard work. Yang Soe slowly draws his sword. He points out that Jin's memory is too good. He knows every top-grade secret in the alliance, which makes him a massive liability. He levels the blade at Jin's throat. He claims that for the justice of the martial world and the safety of the alliance, Jin and his memories need to disappear. Jin can't help but let out a cynical laugh. The idea of these traitors talking about a great cause is almost too much for him to handle. He mocks the Murim alliance, pointing out the absolute absurdity of their danger. To him, they're nothing but cowards hiding behind big words. Struggling to even stay upright, Jin reminds his executioner that the alliance has already lost. They've been crushed by the demonic cult and are barely managing to stay alive. He finds it hilarious that they're worried about further danger when they're already at rock bottom. His gaze is sharp, even as his life fades. Yang Soe doesn't flinch. He stubbornly insists that the alliance will defeat the demonic cult and restore their honor once again. Jin throws it back in his face, reminding him how they ran away to the North Sea. They didn't win, they just used countless innocent people as meat shields to buy themselves time. He's actually looking forward to seeing how they fail this time. He wants to see exactly how Yang Soe plans to uphold his pathetic cause. Looking up at the moon, Jin admits he can't even tell the difference between the righteous alliance and the evil cult anymore. To him, they're both just as filthy. The masked lord's eye narrows. Jin's final regret is that he ever entrusted his fate, and the future of his sect, to hands as tainted as these. Instead of waiting for the sword to fall, Jin makes a final choice. He steps back, away from the blade and toward the edge of the abyss. His bloody hand reaches out one last time. He decides he'll be the one to bring about his own end, rather than giving Yang Soe the satisfaction. As he tumbles into the darkness, he reflects on his life. Because he remembered everything, every single detail was just a fresh layer of hell for him. He falls fast, leaving the cliff and his betrayer far behind. He's finally free from the burden of his perfect memory, or so he thinks. We flash back to the start of the war between the Alliance and the demonic cult. Flags wave over a landscape of constant conflict. The power balance was heavily skewed. The cult was terrifyingly strong, while the Alliance was weak and disorganized. Jin and his fellow disciples were drafted into the chaos. They were used as fodder, simple shields to let the Alliance officials escape with their lives. During their retreat, the Alliance came to him with a deal. They wanted him to memorize every single record they had. They used his disciples' lives as leverage. If he could memorize and restore everything at their base, they promised to pull his people off the front lines. So he did it. He memorized everything like his life depended on it, because it literally did. But things didn't go as planned. He realizes now that he made the wrong choice. He shouldn't have spent those years rot in an archive while his friends were dying. He should have been out on the battlefield. At the very least, he could have given his life to help just one more person escape. He curses the crappy ability heaven gave him. He wanted inner energy, something useful, not just a brain that never forgets a single tragedy. As he lies dying, his regret is absolute. But then, a teal bracelet on his wrist begins to glow with a strange, pulsing light. An explosion of energy erupts from the artifact. His last wish is clear: he should have become strong enough to protect his people himself. No more begging, no more being a tool. He wanted the strength to be the shield himself. Suddenly, everything changes. The cold cliff vanishes, replaced by a bright sky and the roof of a traditional training hall. The world feels warm and alive again. A wooden sword pokes him right in the head. Someone's standing over him, taunting him for being such a pathetic loser. A hand grips the handle of a practice sword. Jin's mind is racing, still caught between his death and this strange new reality. He's lying face down on the ground. He thinks his cursed memory is just playing tricks on him, making him relive some old, painful moment. He lets out a yell as the sharp pain in his head registers. It's too vivid, too real to just be a dying hallucination. It freaking hurts. He looks up, dazed, and sees a group of students watching. A bully with a top knot and a wooden sword is smirking down at him. This is Guy Cheol-young. Jin is frozen in shock. He looks younger, and the environment is exactly as he remembers it from decades ago. He can't believe his eyes. He realizes he's standing in the middle of the Taeyul sex training ground. He's somehow traveled back in time to the days before everything went to hell. Jumpio and Hong are completely bewildered. They've never seen their senior act like this before, and honestly, they don't know whether to be worried or just confused. Jin Soon's face is flushed with pure emotion. Tears well up in his eyes as he looks at the friends he thought were gone forever, his heart racing with a mix of relief and disbelief. He takes a sudden, heavy step forward. His movements are purposeful and intense, cutting through the confusion of the training ground. Without a word, he pulls them both into a tight, desperate hug. He doesn't care how weird it looks to the other students, he's just overwhelmed to find them alive and breathing. Hong is totally weirded out, calling it gross and trying to pull away. Jin can't help but flash back to the last time he saw her, lifeless and cold on a battlefield. Jumpio asks if something's wrong, completely clueless as always. Behind his innocent face, Jin sees the horrific memory of him being impaled during their original timeline. The younger disciples are whispering and pointing in the background. They're all convinced that their senior has finally snapped and lost his mind. Jin realizes that even if this is just a final hallucination before death, his perfect memory is making it feel incredibly vivid. He's determined to cherish every second of it. He gives them a soft, tearful smile. For the first time in what feels like centuries, a genuine spark of warmth and happiness returns to his chest. In a lighter moment, chibi versions of Hong and Jumpio wonder what on earth could be wrong with him. They have absolutely no idea what kind of hell he's been through. He pokes Hong's cheek, teasing her like he used to. He realizes he even misses the way she used to nag him about every little thing during their training. He stretches Jumpio's cheek, recalling how much the kid's bedwetting used to drive him crazy. Now, he'd wash 1,000 blankets just to have his junior back in one piece. The mood shifts instantly as a wooden sword enters the frame. Guy Cheol-yang is sick of being ignored and is ready to ruin the moment. Guy points his weapon right at Jin's face with a sneer. He threatens to beat the other disciples if Jin doesn't stop acting crazy and face him in a duel. Jin's expression immediately goes cold. He finds it insulting that of all the people his memory could show him right now, it had to be this arrogant prick. Guy Cheol-yang smirks, fully aware of his family's massive influence. He's the precious young master of the Jiryong Trading Company, and he acts like he owns the whole sect. He's used to relying on his father's money to get away with everything, including beating his fellow disciples half to death during these duels. Jin finally reaches for his own wooden sword, his grip firm. If this guy wants a fight so badly, he's more than happy to give him exactly what he asked for. He stands tall, a dangerous, predatory grin spreading across his face. He decides to use this chance to get some very satisfying payback from the past. Guy grits his teeth, looking absolutely feral. He isn't used to anyone looking back at him with that kind of cold, unshakable confidence. Guy lunges forward with a furious scream, swinging his sword with all his strength. To him, this is just another chance to humiliate the sex loser. Jin's eye remains perfectly calm, tracking every micro-movement. In his experienced mind, Guy's pro technique is moving as slow as a turtle. Guy uses the Samyang sword art, a style his family privately bought for him from a wandering master. He thinks it makes him invincible. It's a vicious, wild style that emphasizes momentum and raw aggression over actual discipline. It's perfect for someone with zero real skill. The techniques are rough and unpredictable, designed to overwhelm an opponent with sheer violence rather than finesse. Jin remembers it perfectly from his previous life. He knows this art specifically targets the eyes to blind and disable opponents early on. He sidesteps the blow with effortless grace, leaving the other disciples staring in absolute shock. He didn't even have to break a sweat to dodge. In his mind, this is just child's play. Compared to the literal monsters he's fought in the demonic cult, Guy is just a kid waving a stick around. Guy is completely stunned that he missed. He can't believe a trash student like Jin was able to read his movements so perfectly. Jin's thoughts drift back to those endless, soul-crushing nights in the Murim archive, where he was forced to memorize thousands of forbidden techniques. His eyes glow with a faint, eerie blue light. He has an entire library of lethal, high-level moves stored in his brain, waiting to be used. He accesses the Sokian sword art, a style that should be physically impossible for someone of his current rank to even know. As Guy charges again with blind rage, Jin prepares his counterstrike. The air around him seems to sharpen as he settles into a perfect stance. With a focused, piercing glare, he readies his attack. He's not just planning to win, he's planning to humiliate this bully in front of everyone. He executes a flawless basic form of the Sokian sword art. It's a move of incredible speed and surgical precision that catches everyone off guard. The wooden sword connects with a sickening crack against Guy's jaw. His head snaps back as blood sprays from his mouth, his arrogance vanishing in an instant. Jin lets out a low, dark chuckle. Seeing this untouchable bully finally get put in his place feels better than he ever could have imagined. He looks down at his hand, a twisted, satisfied smile on his face. This is the first time in 2 lifetimes that he's felt this kind of pure, unadulterated power. Another brutal hit lands square on Guy's forehead, sending him reeling. The impact is massive and leaves no room for a comeback. The entire training ground goes dead silent as the young master is sent sprawling across the floor. No one can believe what they just witnessed. After taking those 2 hits head-on, the young master stands frozen, gasping for air. He's never been humiliated like this before, especially not by someone he considered absolute trash. Hong and Jumpio are paralyzed with fear and awe. They're happy he won, but they know the Jiarong Trading Company will be out for blood after this. Guy Chioyang's face is a mess of blood and fury as he lets out a guttural scream of agony, the shock of his defeat finally setting in. Despite the blood streaming down his forehead, the young master of the Guy family continues to charge at Jin Soan like a moth to a flame, screaming frantic threats about taking responsibility for the humiliation he's suffered. But as he just managed to crawl a single step forward, with one last pathetic thud, Guy Chioyang collapsed face-first into the dirt, completely unconscious. Jin Soan stood over him with a blank expression, looking oddly detached from his own victory. Hong watches the scene with a mix of disbelief and growing dread, her hands clenched as she takes in the sight of the sect's main benefactor's son defeated. The younger disciples erupt into cheers, surrounding Jin and praising his unexpected strength. They're thrilled to see their tormentor finally humbled and don't care about the consequences yet. Jin's expression remains unreadable, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth hinting at a hidden, dark satisfaction. He looks down at the unconscious Guy, convinced this is just a final, vivid hallucination before his actual death. He feels a strange sense of peace, having settled a lifelong grudge in what he thinks are his last moments. His peaceful reflection is shattered as a fist connects squarely with his jaw. The impact is sudden, shockingly forceful, and far too real to be part of a dream. Hong is fuming, her face red with anger as she screams at Jin for his recklessness. She doesn't share the younger student's sense of triumph and sees only the trouble ahead. She reminds him of the harsh reality Guy's family provides the sect's funding. If the Jiryong Trading Company cuts them off, everyone in the Taeyul sect will be left starving. Jin is stunned, not by her words, but by the sharp, stinging sensation in his jaw. He wonders why a dying hallucination would feel so physically painful. He clutches his bruised cheek, the throbbing pain cutting through his mental fog. Hong continues to rail against him, her voice filled with panic about their already dwindling food supplies. A sudden realization begins to dawn on him as he stares blankly at the ground. The detail, the noise, and especially the pain are far too consistent for a dream. Amidst Hong's incessant shouting and the worried looks of the other students, Jean finally speaks. He realizes this isn't a life flash or a dying vision at all. Hong's anger only deepens at his strange behavior, her shadow looming over him as she reaches her breaking point. She delivers another punishing blow to his head, shouting at him to stop talking nonsense. The force of the strike sends Jean reeling backward toward the floor. Jean falls back, his world spinning as the physical reality of his situation finally sinks in. The cold stone of the training ground feels undeniably solid. He lies flat on his back, a comedic soul escaping his mouth as he blacks out. As his friends panic around him, the truth finally hits him: he hasn't died, he has truly gone back to the past. Rows of medicine drawers line the wall of the quiet infirmary. Jean So-eun lies on a bed with a thick bandage on his cheek, looking like he's seen much better days. His eyes are dazed as he tries to piece together his memories. He eventually sits up, realizing that a single slap from his junior sister was actually enough to knock him out cold. He takes a moment to process the fact that he's actually back in his younger body. His mind wanders back to where the nightmare began, the second coming of the demonic cult. It was a war that nearly wiped out the Murim alliance and pushed his own Taeyul sect to the very edge of destruction. He remembers the piles of bodies and the smell of blood. In the middle of all that chaos, Jean was treated like a tool because of his perfect memory. While others fought, he was stuck at a desk under a mountain of books. He was ordered to memorize and restore every single manual the Alliance owned, working until his body started failing him. He was the archive, not a warrior. He didn't complain, pushing through the exhaustion and the blood to engrave every word into his mind. He wanted to be useful, but he didn't realize how dangerous that knowledge was. Loyalty meant nothing to the people in power. Young Soe stood over him as he lay dying, ready to discard the tool that knew too much. As he coughed up blood, Jean realized his memory had become a liability to the Alliance. He begged for his juniors to be saved, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. He thought death was the end, but he opened his eyes and saw the training grounds of his youth. The transition was so sudden it felt like a hallucination. Everything he had ever memorized was still there, clear as day. With a library of forbidden techniques in his head, he realized he wasn't just a victim anymore. He had already used those future memories to humiliate Gai Cheol-yan, a bully he could never even hope to beat in his previous life. The look on the guy's face was priceless. Back in the infirmary, Jean scratches his head, still trying to make sense of the fact that he's actually regressed. It all feels too real to be a dream. He looks down at the blue dragon bracelet on his wrist, a powerful artifact he took from a demonic cult leader years into the future. It's the only thing that came back with him. This thing was a spoil of war from one of the few battles the Alliance actually won against the demonic cult. He remembers the blood on the ground as he claimed it. He remembers it glowing with a strange, pulsing light right as he took his final breath on that cliff. It was a blinding radiance in his final moments. He wonders if this bracelet is the key to his return, but his thoughts are derailed by a man screaming for him outside the infirmary. The peaceful moment is definitely over. Jean sits up immediately, recognizing the obnoxious voice of someone who clearly thinks they own the entire mountain. Outside, a pompous man is berating the sect leader, demanding to see the brat who dared to hurt his precious son. He's making a massive scene in the courtyard. Jean listens from the door as the man threatens to cut off the sect's funding starting this month. He's using his wealth as a weapon. The sect leader's silhouette is visible through the paper door, her voice sounding small and desperate as she tries to apologize for the mess. She starts begging for forgiveness, promising to discipline Jean severely if the merchant will just overlook the incident this once. It's a painful sight. Jean realizes this man is Guy Yanseok, the father of the bully he just beat. The guy is fuming, his shadow looming over the door like a monster. He continues to insult Jean, calling him a lowly bumpkin, and mocks the entire Taeyul sect for being in such a pitiful state. He's really enjoying his power trip. Jean watches through the gap, seeing the sect leader bowing her head in submission just to keep the school from going bankrupt. She looks defeated. The sight of her cowering brings back flashes of the piles of bodies from his past life. He's seen this kind of helplessness before. He remembers lying in the dirt himself, a man who died with nothing but regret because he lacked the power to stand up for himself. He was just a tool back then, a weakling who couldn't protect anyone he cared about. He refused to let that happen again. His jaw tightens as he bites down on a piece of wood until it snaps, the sharp crack mirroring his inner resolve. He's done being a victim. Jean stands up and stretches out his new body, feeling the strength returning to his limbs. He's ready to move. He looks at a cloth-wrapped token, his mind already spinning with a way to turn the tables on the arrogant merchant. A plan is forming. Jean prepares to step out, his eyes turning cold and sharp. If they want a show, he's more than happy to give them one they'll never forget. Outside, the sect leader keeps thanking Guy Yansiak for his generosity, even as the man scoffs and looks down on her. It's a pathetic display of greed. Yansiak turns to leave, thinking he's successfully intimidated everyone into submission. He looks satisfied with his bullying. He has no idea that Jean is currently watching him from the roof, perched right above his head like a predator. Jean drops down with a mock polite bow, greeting the distinguished guest with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He introduces himself as the bumpkin the man was looking for. He stands tall on the roof ledge, looking down at the shocked sect leader and the furious merchant. The atmosphere shifts instantly. Yansiak's face turns purple as he realizes he's looking at the boy who beat his son. He immediately starts screaming insults again. Jean just sighs and looks away, completely unfazed by the man's sputtering rage. He points out that there's barely any age difference between them. The merchant stared at him in stunned silence, shocked by the boy's sudden outburst. Jean Soan also suddenly realized that he had let his tongue slip. After all, in this current timeline, his body was still just that of a young teenager. Jean clasps his hands together and mocks the man, asking if he's planning to follow his son around like a bodyguard even after he enters the academy. He's effectively silenced the merchant's threats. Guy Yansiak is screaming at the top of his lungs, his face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief. He's accusing Jean Soan of using dirty tricks during the spar to specifically target his son's head. The merchant guild master keeps ranting, claiming his precious son doesn't even need a place as pathetic as the Taeyul sect. According to him, the disciples here are just servants meant to wait on his son until he enters the academy. Jean just stands there looking completely bored, leaning his head on his hand as if he's listening to a dull lecture. He dryly reminds the man that Guy Cheol-yan was the one who beat up over 10 juniors so badly they couldn't even get out of bed. Leaning in with a cold stare, Jean mocks the idea of someone trying to enter the Murim Academy with such embarrassing skills. He doesn't hold back, calling the merchant's son a loser for being beaten by a bumpkin from a third-rate sect. He looks Guy Yansiak right in the eye and tells him that his grand plan for his son's future is nothing more than a delusional dream. He's essentially laughing in the face of the most powerful man in the room. Guy Yansiak is absolutely losing it, veins popping on his forehead as he trembles with rage. One of his servants desperately tries to hold him back, begging him to restrain himself before he does something he'll regret. Jean remains unfazed even as the merchant grabs his collar and screams directly into his face. He calmly asks if Guy Yansiak is truly prepared to take responsibility for what happens if he keeps acting this arrogant. He repeats the word slowly, emphasizing that the merchant's wealth won't protect him from the consequences of his own pride. Jin's gaze is steady, almost predatory. Guy Yansiak just bursts out laughing, clearly thinking he has all the leverage because of his money. He sneers at the Taeyul sect, calling it a third-rate school that's on the verge of total collapse without his support. He laughs in Jin's face, boasting that he can take his business and sponsorship to any other sect he wants. He thinks he's holding the sect's life in his hands. From behind, Jean watches as the man continues his threats, claiming the sect will be begging for their next meal if he decided to walk away. He's trying to crush their spirit. The reality is that the Taeyul sect is still officially one of the 108 peaks, the elite inner circle of the Murim alliance. But in their current, weakened state, most people wonder how they managed to keep that status. Being part of the 108 Peaks comes with a massive privilege, special admission. This allows a sect to recommend one disciple directly to the Murim Academy without them ever having to take the exam. It's a literal golden ticket, bypassing the regular, brutal testing process that thousands of other hopeful martial artists have to go through. It's the only reason someone like Gai Qiu-yang would even be here. Gai Qiu-yang's family guild isn't part of that elite group, so they paid a fortune in sponsorship fees just to buy his way into the sect. He's effectively a pay-to-win disciple. The other disciples look on with worried expressions, knowing their school's survival currently depends on this one entitled bully. Jin Soan, however, looks like he's already planned 3 steps ahead. Facing the merchant's threats head-on, Jin doesn't blink and tells him to go ahead and try cutting the funding. He's calling the man's bluff in front of everyone. He lets out a cold laugh and pats Guy Yanxiak on the shoulder, telling him he'll take full responsibility for whatever happens next. The merchant is visibly stunned by the boy's audacity. Suddenly, Jin's grip on the merchant's arm turns vice-like, his expression shifting into something much darker. He points out that the special admission evaluation is less than a year away. With a manic, terrifying grin, Jin asks why the guild master would settle for this sect if his son was truly as talented as he claims. Surely, you weren't rejected by all of them, were you? Guy Yanxiak is sweating now, his face a mask of shock as he realizes this kid just exposed his family's biggest secret. The boy isn't just strong, he knows things he shouldn't. In his past life, the sect was so desperate for money that they bent over backwards to accommodate every demand the merchant guild made. They were practically slaves to their sponsorship. Trembling with indignation, the merchant asks if Jin even knows who he's talking to, but he can't hide the fear in his eyes. The power dynamic has completely flipped. Back then, they did exactly what the guild wanted and secured that special admission spot for Gai Qiu-yang, hoping it would save them. It was a deal with the devil. Guy Yanxiak tries to regain control, screaming at them to wake up and realize they have no other allies. He claims his guild is the only thing keeping the Taeyul sect from total extinction. Jin leans in so close they're practically touching noses, reminding the man of the cold reality of the previous timeline. He's not intimidated by the man shouting at all. He flips the script entirely, telling Guy Yanxiak that it's actually the Taeyul sect that is saving the merchant guild from total social ruin. Without them, his son has nowhere to go. In his past life, despite all their groveling, the merchant guild cut them off anyway once they got what they wanted. Jin Soan knew the merchant's words were nothing but empty promises. Jin has seen this play out before and knows exactly where it leads. His eyes are hard, focused on a future where he isn't anyone's tool. He watches the merchant walk away, realizing that begging for help from people like that is a complete waste of time. True security only comes from one thing. Guy Yanxiak looks stunned into silence as he prepares to leave, his arrogance completely shattered by a teenager. Jin knows he needs real power to protect himself and his sect. The merchant guild master shouts one last insult as he storms off, but Jin isn't even listening anymore. He's already focused on his next objective. He has a lot to do, and his first step is figuring out how to regain the legendary strength he had before his regression. The clock is ticking. He stops for a second, his expression turning blank as he realizes he hasn't actually thought of the specific how yet. Even a genius can have a brain fart. As the sun sets over the mountains, Jin finds himself at the entrance of a hidden location he remembers from his past life. The air here is cold and heavy. The mouth of the cave is dark and covered in thick, glistening spider webs that shouldn't be there. Something dangerous is definitely nesting inside. He stands in the center of the cavern, surrounded by webs, focused on his simple goal of growing stronger as fast as possible. He doesn't have years to train conventionally. He knows that relying on the current, inefficient arts of his sect will never be enough to reach the top. He needs a shortcut that only he knows about. His target is the 10,000-year fire ginseng, a legendary elixir that can grant a massive, permanent boost to inner chi. It's exactly what his young body needs. He pulls out a mental copy of the Book of Jianghu Elixirs, a classified manual he memorized during his time as the Murim Alliance's archive. It's the most valuable thing in his head right now. The book contains the exact location and timing for every rare herb in the world, and thanks to his total recall, he remembers every single detail perfectly. He knows exactly when it will bloom. But there's a huge problem. The guardian of the ginseng is a massive, multi-eyed human-faced spider. It's much more horrific in person than any of the books ever described. Gene stares down the massive beast, mentally steeling himself. He knows that securing the 10,000-year fire ginseng is his top priority, as it's the only way to quickly fix his current physical limitations. He lunges forward with a shout, drawing his sword and preparing to use the Sokian sword arts of his sect. He's determined to end this fight in a single, decisive strike before the creature can react. Then, with a comical shrug, Gene suddenly stops and abandons the idea of a direct confrontation. He admits to himself that his current inner chi and sword skills are way too weak for a fair fight, and there's no point in wasting energy on a suicide mission. Instead of a sword, Gene grabs a thick wooden branch and sets the end of it ablaze. The orange flames flicker and dance as he prepares to use a much more efficient method to deal with the monster. With a devious smirk, Gene reflects on everything he's learned from the countless books he's memorized over 2 lifetimes. He's realized that in a life-or-death struggle, traditional swordsmanship and the martial Tao are completely irrelevant. The cave erupts into a sea of fire as the highly flammable spider webs ignite, trapping the human-faced spider in a literal inferno. Gene watches from the center of the chaos, unmoved by the heat. A close-up of the spider's grotesque, human-like face shows its multiple eyes wide with terror and pain as the fire consumes it. It never stood a chance against someone who already knew its greatest weakness. Gene stands tall amidst the roaring flames, his silhouette framed by the burning webs. In this new life, he's decided that winning is the only thing that truly matters, no matter how dirty the tactics might be. He clenches his fist tightly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He remembers his past life and whispers a quiet thank you to the very organization that eventually led to his death. His expression turns into one of pure, unrestrained malice as he laughs at the Murim Alliance bastards. He's using the very knowledge they hoarded to build a power base that will one day destroy them. The pages of the Book of Jianghu Elixirs detail the specific properties of both the 10,000-year fire ginseng and its guardian. It's the ultimate cheat sheet for a regressor like Gene. The text explains that the fire ginseng is found in dark caves and is famous for drastically enhancing bone structure and inner chi. It's the perfect foundation for any martial artist. The final note in the book reveals the spider's fatal flaw: its webs are incredibly flammable. The only way for someone with weak martial arts to kill it is to wait until it's feeding and then launch a sudden ambush with fire. A heavy blade plunges deep into the head of the human-faced spider, finally ending its life. Green blood splatters against the cave wall as the creature lets out one last screech. The massive monster collapses into a heap of shriveled legs and dark ichor. The fight is over, but the atmosphere remains heavy. Gene Soan stands alone in the dimly lit cave, the massive corpse at his feet. Despite the win, he doesn't look satisfied. He looks at his hands, muttering to himself that this just isn't enough. The power he's gained so far won't be nearly sufficient for what's coming. His frustration boils over, and he let out a desperate scream that echoes through the empty cavern. Sweat and grime cover his face as the pressure of his second life starts to weigh on him. Even after consuming the essence of such a valuable monster, the inner chi he received is barely a drop in the bucket. His body just can't absorb enough to make a real difference. He realizes his sect's mind arts are seriously flawed, or maybe he's just hitting a wall with his own talent. He stares at the tiny spark of chi in his palm, feeling the gap between his current self and a true master. Exhausted and defeated, he slumps against the rough cave floor. The silence of the cave only makes his thoughts louder. At this rate, he knows he'll never reach the level he needs. Time is ticking, and he's still miles away from his goal. If he doesn't get stronger fast, he won't be able to save the Taeyul sect when the chaos finally begins. He can't let history repeat itself. Visions of the future war flash through his mind, a brutal slaughter where the weak are treated as nothing more than expendable shields. He remembers the faces of those he lost in his first life. He's determined to make sure his fellow disciples don't die meaningless deaths this time around. To do that, he has to become a core member of the Murim alliance before the war even starts. Getting into the Murim Academy within the next year is his first real hurdle. But standing in this cave, the path forward looks almost impossible. His fingers dig into the stone wall, leaving deep gouges in the rock as he grinds his teeth. The physical pain is nothing compared to the fear of failure. He shouts out in a moment of pure desperation, fearing that nothing will actually change. He's stuck in a loop of weakness he can't seem to break. Water drips slowly from the ceiling stalactites, the rhythmic sound echoing through the cold silence. It's a reminder of how slowly his progress is moving. He forces himself to calm down and think he needs more inner chi, and he needs it now. An ordinary training method won't cut it. That's when a specific memory clicks. Guy Yanciak had a legendary Manhwa elixir. It was the snow plum pill, and it was supposed to be his ticket to power. In his mind, he sees Guy Yanciak's father laughing while presenting the pill. The merchant had spent a ridiculous fortune to buy it for his son. But just before Guy Qiuyang could take it, the snow plum pill vanished without a trace. It was a scandal that never got solved. He closes his eyes, banking on the fact that no thief is perfect. Since the theft hasn't happened yet in this timeline, he still has a chance to change the outcome. He's confident he can track the culprits down using everything he's ever read. Humans always leave traces, no matter how careful they are. He activates his total recall, stepping into a mental landscape filled with endless rows of glowing bookshelves. This is his mind palace, where every piece of information he's ever seen is stored. He starts scanning the records, specifically looking for the Murim Alliance monthly reports from the Hefei branch. He needs to find out who was in the area during the original theft. Red energy trails guide him through the massive library, acting like a search engine for his brain. He flies past irrelevant memories, focused entirely on his goal. He moves with surgical precision, weaving through the stacks of mental data. Every turn takes him closer to the truth buried in the Alliance's archives. He pulls a massive tome from the shelf, certain the answer is hidden within these pages. The search is narrowing down to a handful of individuals. He cross-references mission reports and entry logs, tracking the movements of suspected criminals. The pieces are finally starting to fit together. Every single record he's ever memorized is laid out right in front of him, glowing with a red hue. It's a massive amount of data, but his mind handles it with ease. He gathers the scattered pieces of information to finally deduce the answer. The names of the thieves are becoming clear. 3 names appear on wooden identification tags: Zhu Jiangmak, known as the soul-chasing guest, and the corrupt Yensong swordsman, Guilmu and Zhang Hang. These are the ones who took the pill. He slams the record shut, finally having a clear target in his sights. He knows exactly where they will be and when they will have the elixir. He brings his hands together in a prayer-like gesture, realizing his walking library status is actually going to pay off. Knowledge really is power. A dark smirk crosses his face as he thanks the thieves for doing all the hard work for him. He's not just going to stop them, he's going to take the prize for himself. Suddenly, the blue dragon bracelet on his wrist starts to pulse with a bright teal light. It catches him off guard mid-thought. He looks down, genuinely confused by the sudden reaction from the ancient artifact. It hasn't done anything like this since he regressed. The glow intensifies, huming with a strange energy that vibrates through his entire arm. He can feel the power radiating from the jade. Wisps of teal energy start to leak out, swirling around his arm like living smoke. He has no idea what the bracelet is trying to do. The tendrils lash out toward the dead spider corpse, wrapping around its remains like predatory tentacles. It's a bizarre and terrifying sight. The energy focuses on a glowing red sphere, the inner core of the human-faced spider. The bracelet seems to be hunting for the monster's concentrated essence. It's like the artifact is reaching out with a mind of its own, bypassing Jin Soan's control entirely. The core begins to pulse in response to the teal energy. He watches in total shock as the blue dragon bracelet begins to forcibly absorb the spider's inner core. The dark energy is being purified and pulled directly into the artifact. Light spills into the cave entrance, startling a pair of birds into the open sky as the echoes of battle finally begin to fade.
It's a sharp contrast to the damp darkness of the cavern behind them.
Inside, Jin Soan is enveloped in a swirling storm of red and teal energy. The spiders remain scattered across the floor around him. The air hums with the sheer force of the core's power being absorbed. Sweat pours down his face as he grits his teeth, his wide eyes reflecting the raw, unrefined power currently flooding his system. The intensity is almost more than his young body can handle. He stares at his palms as they crackle with a vibrant teal light, humming with a frequency that feels both ancient and overwhelming. It's a physical manifestation of the purified energy surging through his veins. The shock on his face turns into a manic laugh. This isn't just a simple power-up, it's a total game-changer for his current state. He can feel the bottlenecks in his cultivation literally shattering. He flashes back to his past life, remembering the day he claimed the blue dragon bracelet as a trophy from a fallen demonic cult leader. It was a victory bought with the blood of his comrades, and he kept it to honor their sacrifice. Back in the present, he stands firm on the cold cave floor, feeling the energy settle into his core and anchor him. The weight of his previous life feels a little lighter now that he has the means to fight back. He clenches his fist, and the teal lightning intensifies, wrapping around his forearm like a living creature of light. The sheer density of the chi is unlike anything he's felt in this young body before. With a sharp exhale, he throws a punch that releases a massive shockwave, instantly shattering the rock walls of the cavern. Dust and debris fly everywhere as the force of the blow echoes through the mountain. As the dust clears, he realizes the purified energy is blending perfectly with his Taeyul mind arts, bypassing years of hard training in a single moment. It's the perfect synergy between a righteous technique and a demonic treasure. Standing in the dark, he watches a small orb of blue light glow at his waist and knows that heaven hasn't abandoned him after all. He finally has a path to the strength he needs to protect his people. Far from the cold cave, the Taeyul sect is alive with the warm glow of lanterns for a festive banquet. The air is filled with the smell of rich food and the sound of laughter. Wealthy guests flood the courtyard, showering Guild Master Guy with praise while whispering about how money can buy even the rarest of elixirs. They are all here to witness the celebration of his son's guaranteed future. Guy Yansiak is in his element, loudly boasting about the legendary snow plum pill his father secured from the Manhwa sect. He makes sure everyone knows exactly how much it cost to pull those strings. He lets out a smug laugh, fully convinced that his father's wealth has already guaranteed his success at the academy. To him, martial arts is just another thing that can be bought and sold. Sitting on a stone ledge nearby, Hong Sarian looks completely unimpressed, her mind preoccupied with much more serious matters. She's the only daughter of the sect leader, and she can see the decay in the room. She stares into the distance, her expression turning somber as the sounds of the party fade into the background for her. Her eyes are filled with a mix of frustration and genuine concern. Memories of Guy Yansiak getting beat down by Jin Soan flash through her head, a reminder of the trouble that started all of this. She knows that family won't let such a public humiliation go unpunished. She remembers the look on Guild Master Guy's face and worries about what kind of retaliation Jin might be facing right now. The silence from his side is what scares her the most. She sighs and mutters to herself, calling Jin a complete idiot for leaving her behind to deal with all this political drama. It's her way of masking how much she's actually worried about him. A young disciple snaps her out of it, running up and shouting for his favorite senior sister to join the fun. The kid's energy is a sharp contrast to her heavy mood. Another boy follows with a plate of steaming food, determined to get her to crack a smile. They clearly look up to her as a big sister figure in the sect. The kids crowd around her, offering up the best treats from the banquet and demanding she take a bite. Their innocent excitement is hard to ignore, even for her. In the background, Guy Yansiak stalks off with a scowl, clearly annoyed that he's no longer the center of attention. He can't stand seeing the disciples ignore him for someone else. Hong Sarian finally lets out a genuine laugh, telling the kids to hurry and eat before they starve themselves. She's glad to have a moment of normalcy away from the merchant's boasting. One of the girls stops and gives her a knowing look, asking if she was getting all moody because she missed Jean. The sudden question caught her completely off guard. Her face turns beet red as she explodes in embarrassment, yelling at them to mind their own business. Her reaction only confirms what the kids already suspected.
The kids just laugh it off, holding up a plate of meat they plan to save specifically for Gene because it's his absolute favorite. They're convinced he'll be back soon to join them.
Her anger vanishes in an instant, replaced by a soft, quiet smile as she sees how much the younger ones still care for him. It's a bittersweet reminder of the bond they all share. She starts stuffing her face with food to cover her emotions, while the kids continue to tease her with cheeky grins. She tries to act tough, but she's clearly moved. She jokingly threatens to finish every last scrap herself if they don't start eating right this second. The kids take the threats seriously and prepare for a feeding frenzy. The boys let out a shout and start shoveling food into their mouths, their faces puffed out with rice and meat. It's a messy, joyful scene that briefly clears the heavy atmosphere. She watches them with a warm laugh, but as the moment passes, her eyes drift back to the empty space where Jean should be. The worry hasn't left her, it's just been pushed to the side for a moment. As the sun dips below the horizon, she lets out one last frustrated yell into the wind, calling Jean a massive idiot for making her worry. Her voice carries over the sect walls and into the twilight. Night falls completely, and the sky is dotted with stars above the glowing lanterns of the sect. The banquet shows no signs of slowing down, even as the hour grows late. Back at the main hall, Guildmaster Guy raises a cup to the crowd, basking in his own self-importance as the banquet continues.
He's clearly enjoying every second of the attention.
Yansiak is right there beside him, clinking cups with a friend and looking entirely too smug.
He truly believes he's already achieved the greatness he's celebrating.
A dancer twirls gracefully across the floor, her long silk sleeves flowing in the air as the music picks up.
The celebration is at its peak, and everyone is lost in the revelry.
While the party rages on, someone is moving across the rooftops with terrifying speed, their feet barely making a sound on the tiles. They are a shadow in the night, unnoticed by the drunken guests below. The dark figure leaps from one building to the next, a master of stealth moving through the moonlight.
Their goal is far more important than any banquet.
He clears a massive gap with ease, his body low and lean as he navigates the dangerous heights. Every movement is deliberate and silent, the hallmark of a professional. He lands silently and pulls up his mask, a low, triumphant chuckle escaping him. This is Zhu Jiangmok, the thief who just stole the legendary pill right from under everyone's noses. Zhu Jiangmok stands in a moonlit clearing, clutching the stolen chest with a wide, arrogant grin.
He laughs at the ease of his theft, mocking the Jiriang Merchant Guild's supposedly impenetrable security.
He unlatches the ornate box to gaze upon the snowplum pill, which glows with a soft, ethereal pink light. The high-grade elixir is exactly as the rumors described, pulsating with a concentrated essence of inner qi. Focused entirely on his prize, the thief fails to notice a silent figure crouched in the shadows of the nearby trees. Jin Soan, hidden behind a mask, watches the celebration with a cold and calculating gaze. Zhu Jiangmok continues to boast to himself, certain that this pill will provide the energy required to master the heaven-piercing divine poem. He is already imagining his rise to the top of the martial world. Satisfied with his loot, he decides to make a quick exit before any pursuers can catch up to him. But his plans are cut short as a sudden, lethal presence fills the air directly behind him. A brilliant white sword strike flashes through the darkness, decapitating the thief in a single, brutal stroke. As his headless corpse collapses into the grass, Guilmu lands nearby, his long robes fluttering in the night breeze. A hand reaches down to pick up the red box from the blood-stained grass, its owner offering a mock apology for the interruption. The voice is calm and predatory, cutting through the silence of the woods. A figure in a dark mask steps forward, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light as he lays claim to the elixir. He makes it clear that he has his own desperate need for the legendary snowplum pill. The scene shifts to a dusty hunter's shop, where heavy iron bear traps lie in wait, their jagged teeth sharp enough to crush bone. Hefei's finest hunter supply shop was a quiet place, decorated with the pelts of beasts that had met their end in these very traps. Behind the counter, the shopkeeper stood ready for business. The shopkeeper looked up, his eyes narrowing as he sized up the new customer. Something about the young man's presence felt out of place in a shop for common hunters. Jin Soan walked into the shop with purpose, his shadow stretching across the wooden floorboards. He didn't look like he was here for simple rabbit snares or basic camping gear. He leaned against the counter, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He casually asked if the shop sold man-catching traps, as if he were ordering a simple meal. The shopkeeper's eyes widened in surprise at the unusual request. The casual way Jin So-eun spoke sent a chill through the small room. Recovering his composure, the owner boasted about his wide selection of hunting gear. He claimed to have everything from tiny rabbit snares to traps that could take down mountain-sized bears, everything except items meant for humans. Jin So-eun didn't flinch, slamming a heavy bag of gold onto the counter. He demanded traps strong enough to catch tigers or bears, dismissing any concerns about ruining the pelts. Looking down at the cold, sharp edge of a trap, he saw his own reflection in the metal. He specified that he needed something powerful enough to take a limb clean off at the slightest touch. He laughed, his eyes glinting with a mischievous, almost manic energy. He asked if there was something even better, something that could kill in a single hit. The shopkeeper broke into a cold sweat, his long-honed intuition screaming at him. He knew he probably shouldn't be selling these tools to someone with that look in their eyes. Back in the present, the forest is dead silent. The assassin remains standing over Chu Jong-mok's corpse, savoring the fruits of his labor. Gu Ilmo wiped a splash of blood from his cheek, a smug grin on his face. He had expected the thief to put up more of a fight, given his reputation in the martial world. He held the ornate red box with a triumphant look, finally claiming the prize they had killed for. The 5 swords of Din Song weren't above a little murder if it meant securing a legendary elixir. A sudden rustle of leaves caught their attention as a boot stepped firmly onto the forest floor. They weren't as alone as they thought. Jang Hang laughed, praising his senior brother for the easy victory. They congratulated themselves, certain that their status as righteous swordsmen would keep them above any suspicion. Gu Ilmu didn't waste time, suggesting they dispose of the body immediately. They needed to make it look like the thief had simply vanished into thin air without a trace. Before leaving, Jang Hang was eager to see the contents of the box. He suggested they verify the snow plum pill right then and there. They popped the lid, and a brilliant, radiant glow burst from the box. The air was instantly filled with the sweet, rich scent of plum blossoms, confirming the pill's authenticity. The 2 swordsmen were mesmerized by the glowing orb, their greed visible in their wide eyes. They were so distracted that they didn't notice the masked figure lurking just behind them. A sudden realization hit them as they sensed a third presence nearby. They looked up to find Jin So-eun staring right at them, his eyes crinkled in a mocking smile. "Who's there?" Gu Ilmu screamed, but the masked figure was already moving like a shadow. He dodged a wild swing, his movements fluid and unervingly fast. Before they could react, Jin So-eun held up the red box with a triumphant flourish. Gu Ilmu's jaw dropped in disbelief as he realized the prize had been snatched right from his hand. "Junior brother, catch that thief!" Gu Ilmu roared, pointing a trembling finger. Jang Hang didn't need to be told twice, drawing his sword and lunging forward. Jang Hang charged with a furious yell, swinging his blade through the air. He shouted about punishing anyone who dared to steal what he believed belonged to him. Jin So-eun turned and sprinted into the woods, throwing a sarcastic remark over his shoulder. He mocked their hypocrisy, calling them out for their own thievery. The pursuit was on, with the 2 swordsmen leaping through the trees in hot pursuit. Jin stayed just out of reach, reminding them that they were the ones who stole it first. Jang Hang pushed himself harder, closing the gap as he swung his heavy blade. He was determined to cut the masked intruder down and reclaim the elixir. With a sudden, agile jump, Jin So-eun cleared a fallen log and disappeared into the dense undergrowth. The swordsman followed blindly, fueled by rage and desperation. Jin glanced back one last time, a playful warning appearing in his mind. He told them to watch their step as they charged forward. A heavy metal trap, hidden beneath the leaves, snapped shut with a sickening crunch. The iron teeth bit deep into Jang Hang's leg, pinning him to the forest floor. Jang Hang's eyes bulged in pure agony as blood sprayed across the leaves. The sudden, violent shock left him gasping, unable to even scream. From his vantage point, Jin So-eun watched the scene unfold with cold satisfaction. He whispered jackpot to himself, his plan working even better than expected. Jang Hang gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled against the iron jaws. Every movement only made the teeth sink deeper into his mangled leg. A gut-wrenching scream finally tore through the quiet forest. The trap had done its job, turning a master swordsman into a wounded animal. Guillermo skidded to a halt, looking back at his trapped junior brother in horror. Jin Soan stood nearby, casually watching as if he were merely an observer. Guillermo snarled, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and fury. He cursed the masked man for resorting to such tricks instead of fighting like a proper swordsman. He pointed his sword at Jin Soan, his voice trembling with rage. He demanded the thief take off the mask and show his face. Jin Soan didn't bother reaching for a weapon, instead casually picking up a stone from the ground. He looked at Guillermo with a calm, steady gaze. "You want me to tell you my name, my sect, and my master?" Jin Soan asked, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. He knew he held all the cards now. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the small stone toward Guillermo's feet. It landed with a soft thud, a seemingly harmless gesture. Guillermo's eyes widened as another massive trap erupted from the ground beneath him. The metal jaws slammed shut with a thunderous clang, sealing his fate alongside his brother. Guillermo's face was a map of raw shock and agonizing pain. The reality that he'd been outplayed by a thief was finally starting to sink in. Jin Soan stood perfectly still in the middle of a literal minefield of iron traps, his dark cape whipping in the breeze. He declared himself the new owner of the snow plum pill, leaving the two murderers to rot. As he watched them struggle, his mind flickered back to how he'd put the pieces together. It all came down to one simple question: how did he know they were the ones who did it? He had spent hours digging through records, cross-referencing names like Zhu Jiangmak and Guillermo. Something about the official alliance reports just didn't sit right with him. In his mind, shelves of ancient books and scrolls glowed with a ghostly red light as he searched. He looked for anyone who showed even a tiny, unexplained bump in their inner chi around that time. The memory of Zhu Jiangmak's disappearance was the smoking gun. The man was a legendary thief, but he'd vanished without a trace the exact moment the snow plum pill was stolen. Jin Soan calculated that if two people split the pill, their strength would increase subtly and at the exact same time. It was a pattern only someone with his total recall could ever hope to find. Back in reality, the two swordsmen were visibly shaking, their arrogance completely drained. They couldn't wrap their heads around how this masked stranger knew their names and their darkest secrets. Jin Soan turned his back on them, walking away with a casual, mocking gait. He confirmed that he knew them well, members of the prestigious Diansong sect's 5 swords. Guillermo screamed after him, his voice cracking with pure desperation. He tried to hide behind the name of the Diansong sect and the Murim alliance, threatening brutal retaliation if he didn't stop. Jin Soan just glanced back over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and full of mockery behind his black mask. He asked since when a common robber had the right to report another robber to the law. Driven to a total breaking point, Jiang Hangs ignored his mangled leg and lunged forward with a primal roar. He threw a heavy punch, determined to crush the man who had humiliated him. A dull thud echoed through the trees as his fist hit the dirt, but his target was already gone. He snarled, refusing to believe that such cheap tricks could actually stop someone of his caliber. Jin Soan moved like a shadow through the field, iron traps flying into the air as they were triggered by his passing. The entire forest floor was a mess of jagged metal, and he was the only one who knew the safe path. Jiang Hang let out a mocking laugh as he completely neutralized all of the masked man's tricks. Dike Tiang On, Tanavan Nin Dong Trap Ma Min Tun Kart Dong Tian De Sam Kung Kong Koi Lan Long. Guillermo and Jiang Hang regrouped for a split second, their eyes burning with hatred. Guillermo vowed that he would rip off the thief's mask and tear him limb from limb the moment he caught him. Jin Soan remained completely silent, his expression hidden behind the black cloth as he watched them from the shadows. He was just waiting for the right moment to lead them into his final trap. He turned and sprinted away again, his movements fast and precise. The two swordsmen didn't hesitate, diving back into the chase with their blades drawn and ready to kill. Guillermo shouted for his brother to stay close as they headed toward a section of the forest covered in deep, fallen leaves. They knew this was likely where the most traps were hidden. The ground was a thick blanket of brown and green, making it impossible to see what was underneath. Footprints were the only thing they could use as a guide through the death trap. They jumped together, their bodies silhouetted against the bright, full moon as they cleared a wide gap in the brush. The only sound was the heavy thud of their boots and their ragged breathing. From an overhead view, it looked like a high-stakes game of follow the leader. The two swordsmen were desperate to close the distance, while Jin So-won stayed just one step ahead. Gu Ilmo watched the ground like a hawk, making sure to step exactly where his brother had already landed. He was certain that if one of them made it through, the path had to be safe. A twisted, arrogant smile spread across Gu Ilmo's face as he felt the solid ground beneath his feet. He laughed, taunting Jin So-won and claiming that his little tricks weren't working anymore. Jin So-won didn't say a word, continuing to weave through the trees with effortless grace. He was leading them through a maze they didn't even realize was a trap until it was too late. The two swordsmen were practically on top of him now, their faces contorted with murderous intent. They were absolutely sure this was where they would finally corner him. A heavy boot landed firmly on a pile of dry leaves. For one tiny second, there was nothing but the sound of leaves being crushed underfoot. Jin So-won's eye narrowed, a cold, sharp light reflecting in his pupil as he sensed the exact moment the trap was triggered. He had them right where he wanted them. Then came the sound that ended it all, a sharp, metallic click hidden beneath the foliage. The path they thought was safe was actually the heart of the trap field. Jin So-won looked back over his shoulder, a dark, satisfied intensity in his gaze. The game was finally over. A massive iron trap erupted from the ground, snapping shut on Jang Hang's leg with a bone-chilling crunch. Blood sprayed instantly, painting the surrounding leaves a deep, dark red. A violent burst of crimson covered the screen as the heavy metal teeth tore through muscle and bone. The agony was immediate and overwhelming. Both Gu Ilmo and Jang Hang were pinned to the forest floor, screaming in raw, unfiltered pain. Their expensive swords were forgotten in the dirt as they clutched at their mangled legs. Jin So-won walked back toward them, standing over his broken enemies with a cold, mocking expression. He complimented them on being a bit smarter than he thought, even if it didn't save them. He gestured toward the ground, where dozens of glowing blue outlines revealed the true scale of his preparation. The entire area was packed so densely with traps that there was almost no safe ground at all. He leaned in closer, his voice low as he explained the harsh truth. They had tried to follow his footsteps perfectly, but even a hair's difference was enough to trigger a trap in a field this dense. Gu Ilmo stared up at him in pure terror, his face pale and slick with cold sweat. He gasped that such precision was impossible for any human, especially in a place this crowded with traps. Jin So-won's gaze was piercing, his eyes glowing with the power of his total recall. He stood as the ultimate predator who had just finished a long, calculated game of cat and mouse. He reached for his sword, the cold metal glinting under the moonlight. He was ready to finish this and walk away with the prize he had worked so hard for. He explained that it wasn't about luck or magic, it was his memory. It was the only gift the heavens had ever truly given him, and he was going to make sure they remembered it. As the screams of the two men faded into the night, the only thing left in the air was the thick, metallic scent of blood. Jin So-won stood victorious, the snow plum pill finally his. High above the bustling streets of Hefei, the ornate eaves of a grand manor caught the bright midday sun. A voice echoed from within, questioning the current influence of the Taeyul sect. Inside a serene room, a man's hand gripped a warm cup of tea, steam rising into the air. He let out a low, contemplative hum as he considered the shifting political landscape of the martial world. Elder Namgung Taewon sat across from Jigul Sumyeon, the chief strategist of the Murim alliance, whose face was obscured by a long, translucent veil. They spoke of the 108 Peaks, the prestigious group of sects that served as the backbone of their alliance. Namgung Taewon wore a wide, unsettling smile as he confirmed Jigul Sumyeon's observations. He noted that while the old guard held their titles, several ambitious new sects had been rising rapidly within the city of Hefei. The two men sat in a sparsely furnished room, illuminated by the harsh light of a large circular window. Jigul Sumyeon casually suggested that perhaps the time had come to replace some of the aging peaks with more capable candidates. Jigul Sumyeon took a slow, measured sip of his tea, his eyes sharp and unreadable behind the veil. He pondered the rumors circulating within the alliance, wondering if the foundations of their order were as stable as they appeared. Namgung Taewon offered a teapot with a practiced, friendly gesture, asking if the rare tea leaves suited the strategist's refined taste.
Jigul Sumyeong remained silent, recalling reports that Namgung Taewon was secretly pulling the strings of the Iron Sword sect.
Jigul Sumyeong stared into the golden depths of his teacup, the surface rippling slightly.
He reminded the elder that a member of the 108 Peaks could not be cast aside without a legitimate and severe justification.
A bead of sweat formed on Namgung Taewon's forehead, though he kept his polite smile firmly in place. He asked if the strategist was implying that the Taeyul sect had committed some specific crime or negligence.
Jigul Sumyeong continued to drink in silence, letting the tension hang heavy in the air. Namgung Taewon took the opportunity to mention rumors that the Taeyul sect was allegedly abusing its special admission privileges for profit.
Jigul Sumyeong repeated the elder's words with a tone of mock surprise, his veiled head tilting slightly. He asked if he was truly suggesting that a sect of such standing would exploit its status for personal gain.
Namgung Taewon's grin stretched wider, turning into a predatory leer that reached his eyes.
He leaned forward, finishing the thought by asking if they were using those ancient privileges simply to satisfy their own insatiable greed. He leans in, his face contorting into a cunning, toothy grin as he speaks of satisfying greed through ancient privileges. Outside, a bird perches on a gnarled tree branch overlooking the tiled roofs of the quiet complex. The sinister official continues his oily speech while his guest, partially hidden behind a veiled hat, listens silently across the low table. He gestures wildly with his hands, acting out a facade of humility and misunderstood intentions. A sharp, calculating eye narrows for a brief moment, betraying the greed hidden behind his humble words. He slowly tilts a white teapot, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from the cups. The amber liquid flows steadily into the small green cup as the conversation turns to honoring the past.
Namgung Taewon offers the tea with a polite bow, though his expression remains sinister and deeply unsettling.
Cut to an inn late at night, where a lone figure sits slumped over a wooden table in the dim courtyard.
Jin Soan is deep in a trance, his eyes squeezed shut as a blue aura flickers around his face. The young man sits shirtless in the dark room, intense blue chi radiating from his muscular back like a cooling flame. Sweat pours down his jaw as he pushes himself through the final, agonizing stage of his cultivation session. One eye snaps open, glowing with a fierce, ethereal blue light as the energy finally peaks. He sits peacefully in the center of the room as the turbulent aura begins to settle into his core. The martial artist clenches his fist, feeling the weight of 30 years' worth of internal energy pulsing through his veins. He stands up with a triumphant, manic grin. He's already surpassed the power he had at the peak of his previous life. Jin Soan heads down the stairs, his boots thudding loudly against the wooden steps in the quiet inn. He starts throwing on his outer robes, calling out to wake whoever is currently on duty in the main hall. The server boy, an energetic kid with his brown hair tied in two buns, nearly falls off a table in shock. The young master takes a seat and asks for anything edible, his hunger finally catching up to him after days of meditation. The boy is stunned, stammering that the kitchen has already been closed for the night. Jin Soan just laughs and slams a heavy stack of silver coins onto the table with a confident smirk. The sight of all that money immediately changes the boy's tune, and he sprints toward the kitchen to wake the chef. As he waits, he recalls how he secured those funds by using his bracelet to drain the life force from a massive tiger. Dark, swirling energy emanates from the azure dragon bracelet on his wrist as it processes the life force it stole. The young master managed to skin the beasts afterward, turning his training session into a massive profit. A flashback shows him barging into a shop, gleefully tossing a pile of premium tiger pelts onto the counter. Back in the present, he rests his chin on his hands, a shadow of worry finally crossing his face. He remembers how the bracelet looked when it was ruthlessly draining the giant spider in the cave. The memory of the tiger's dying roar flickers in his mind, making him realize the scale of the power he now holds. Jin Soan knows that if anyone sees him use this power, they might mistake it for some forbidden demonic art. He grips the fabric of his sleeve, knowing his bracelet's power looks exactly like the notorious heaven-devouring art. If the Murim Alliance catches wind of this, his head won't be the only one on the line, his whole sect would be in danger. The young master's thoughts are cut short as the boy returns, balancing multiple trays of steaming food. The aroma is enough to snap him out of it, and he turns into a total glutton at the sight of the unexpected feast. The martial artist starts inhaling the noodles like he hasn't eaten in weeks, ignoring the kid hanging around the table. The server boy leans in close, asking if he's heard the latest rumors going around the city lately. He mentions that a precious spiritual elixir was recently stolen right out from under the Jiryang Merchant Guild's nose. Jin So-un freezes mid-bite as the kid excitedly describes how the thief pulled off the heist during a crowded banquet. The boy adds that the Murim alliance is so embarrassed they've already dispatched an elite investigation team to find the culprit. He nearly chokes, coughing and spitting out food as he realizes just how quickly the heat is closing in on him. Server boy leans in, offering a cup of water while asking the young master if he's alright after choking on his meal. Jin So-un waves him off, quickly regaining his composure to ask if the Murim alliance found any evidence during their search. His heart races as he stares wide-eyed, terrified that his heist might have actually put an innocent person behind bars. He knows that since he's the real thief, any arrest made by the alliance would be a total miscarriage of justice. The server boy explains that the trail went cold almost immediately, leaving the investigation team with absolutely nothing to go on. The young master lets out a massive sigh of relief before quickly masking it with a fake pained expression, pretending to feel sorry for the guild's loss. The chatter continues as the server mentions another massive banquet that's about to be held nearby in the city of Hefei. The young man's expression instantly turns grim as he hears the specific name of the group hosting the upcoming event. It's the Iron Sword sect, and they're throwing a 7-day feast to celebrate their leader's 60th birthday. He realizes with a sinking feeling that the timing perfectly matches the most shameful day from his original life. In a red-tinted memory of the past, Jin So-un's father, a man with messy black hair, is forced to kneel in a pool of his own blood. Looking down on him is the Iron Sword sect leader, an arrogant elder with a thick white beard and a mocking, cruel smile. His father's face is pressed against the floor, his teeth bared in a mix of physical agony and absolute humiliation. The scene was a public spectacle of shame, with his father forced to bow before a massive crowd of mocking witnesses. He had to swallow his pride and offer a groveling apology directly to the man who was systematically crushing him. Jin So-un watches his broken father from the side, knowing that every drop of blood spilled that day was his own fault. Back in the present, he clenches his fist so hard his knuckles turn white, the memory still burning in his mind. The young master stares into the distance, resolving that this time around, he'll avoid going near that place at all costs. He stands up so abruptly that he startles the boy, whose expression shifts from confusion to worry. He begins to walk away, his steps heavy with the weight of a decision he never thought he'd have to face again. The young man steps through a doorway and into a blinding white light, the transition between intent and reality blurring into a sudden flash. Suddenly, he's thrust into a life-or-death duel against the Iron Sword sect leader's grandson, a muscular warrior with wild maroon hair. The grandson brings down a massive rectangular greatsword with enough force to shatter the earth and send debris flying in every direction. Mid-air and clashing steel, Jin So-un struggles to process how he ended up in a duel with the sect leader's grandson so suddenly.
A few days ago at the Tei sect, the disciples are out in the sun putting in the work. One of them hits his limit and collapses right on the stairs. The Lee brothers are absolutely spent. Yunho is chugging water while Junpyo is just a heap on the floor. Yunho huffs, questioning if doing 100 strikes in this heat actually helps them master their technique. Junpyo teases him, asking where that guy went who wanted to be as cool as senior brother Jin. Yunho gets all defensive, but Junpyo keeps pushing his buttons about his admiration for the main man. Little Dongryong pipes up, mentioning that Jin has been MIA for over a week now. Yunho wonders if he's staying away on purpose, because things got awkward after he trashed their senior brother. Junpyo thinks he might have bilayed for good, fearing the Jiryang Merchant Group's revenge. They start talking about him in the past tense, like he's never coming back. Suddenly, Dongryong's face lights up as he spots a familiar figure approaching. Jin So-un finally walks through the gates with a massive sack slung over his shoulder. He's deep in thought, figuring that if he avoids the upcoming banquet, his father won't have to suffer another humiliation. To him, the choice is simple: "Stay away from the Iron Sword sect and break the cycle." He looks up at the sign, knowing the Tae sect has been the Murim's laughingstock for too long. He decides it's not just him. The entire sect needs to skip that birthday banquet. He's trying to come up with a solid excuse when a shout breaks his concentration. The Lee brothers come charging out, thrilled to see that their senior brother is actually back. A crowd of younger disciples gathers around, everyone excited to have him home. Jin gives Dongryong a pat on the head, asking the kids if they've been behaving while he was gone. The happy reunion is cut short by a booming voice that makes everyone freeze. It's his father, Jin Tae-sun, and he looks like he's about to blow a fuse. Instead of being scared, Jin So-won gets all emotional seeing his father alive and well in this life. He throws his arms wide and goes in for a sentimental hug. He's genuinely touched, thinking about how beautiful this second chance really is. And then reality hits him, literally, as Tae-sun plants a heavy fist right on his head. Tae-sun starts screaming about the mess Jin caused and how the whole sect almost ended up on the streets. Hong Saryeon watches the warm welcome from the side, convinced Jin's head might actually be cracked. Right then, Jae Yeon-seok stomps over, looking like he's been stewing in his own anger the whole time. He demands a rematch, convinced that Jin only won last time because of some cheap trick. Jin just gives him a creepy, mocking grin that says he's not taking any of this seriously. He starts acting all dramatic, shielding his eyes like Jae is glowing with some divine power. He mocks him, claiming Jae's expert aura from the stolen pill is so bright it's blinding. Jae looks like he's about to have an absolute aneurysm from the disrespect. He storms off in a huff, while Saryeon asks why Jin is still picking fights with him. Jin just ignores her and turns his attention back to the massive bag he brought. He opens it up to reveal a treasure trove of mooncakes, taffy, and all sorts of expensive sweets. The kids go wild for the treats, but Saryeon wonders where he even got the money for this stuff. He tells her to quit the nagging and just grab something to eat. Saryeon mumbles to herself, realizing that even while he was out, he was only thinking about the sect. She explains that the merchant group is too busy with their own problems to visit them anymore. She tells him he doesn't need to carry the whole weight of the world on his own shoulders. Saryeon's eyes well up as she yells at him to never suddenly disappear like that again. Jin So-won is caught off guard, seeing a softer side of his usually prickly junior sister. He realizes she's being weirdly nice, so he figures it's best to just keep his mouth shut for once. He clears his throat and asks if only the merchant group is invited to the Iron Sword sect's banquet. His father, Jin Tae-sun, steps up behind him and drops the bad news. The Tae sect is attending as well, which was definitely not what Jin had in mind. Saryeon explains that while the sect leader wasn't thrilled, skipping it would be considered a major insult. Jin starts sweating, realizing he needs to cook up a solid excuse to stay behind. He watches his father walk away, sensing a tension he didn't notice before. Tae-sun tells everyone else to stay home while he goes alone, but Jin isn't about to let his old man face that den of vipers solo. Young Dongryong approaches him, looking a bit hesitant. He pulls out some crumpled rice cakes, offering them up as a humble homecoming gift. Both Jin and Saryeon are stunned by the kid's sincerity. Dongryong explains he's been saving these since the last banquet just so he could eat them with Jin. The boy looks down, feeling a bit embarrassed about his stale snack now that Jin brought back high-quality sweets. He even offers to toss them out, thinking they aren't worth keeping anymore. Jin just looks down at him with a soft, genuine smile. To everyone's shock, he grabs the rice cake and starts wolfing it down. Dongryong watches with pure joy as his hero actually enjoys the gift he saved for so long. Jin laughs, telling the boy it was so delicious that he couldn't help but finish every bite. The kid's face lights up, completely thrilled by the reaction. In return, Jin tells him he can have his entire share of the mooncakes and taffy. But watching the kids enjoy their sweets, Jin realizes that hiding won't solve their problems. Saryeon senses the shift in his mood. He knows if they keep avoiding confrontations, the insults will just get worse for the next generation. With a determined grin, he declares that they're all going to the Iron Sword sect together. Cut to the day of the 60th birthday banquet, with a massive line of carriages and martial artists heading for the gates. The Tae sect delegation is part of the crowd, led by a man named Kang Ki-seok. They finally reach the imposing front gates of the Iron Sword sect. Kang Ki-seok, the QHWA hall leader, warns them all to behave and not cause any trouble. Jin can't help but tease him, asking if the hall leader was sent specifically to keep a leash on him. Kang isn't in the mood for jokes, snapping at the kid for acting out of line before they even get inside. Jin points out that it's hard to be a saint when people keep going out of their way to provoke him. Listening to the nagging, Jin realized the hall leader has spent way too much time around his father. He notes how unusually quiet his father has been throughout the entire journey. Kang shuts him up with a sharp smack to the back of the head. He starts ranting about how he used to change Jin's diapers, demanding a little more respect for his elders. They continue their walk toward the entrance, but things are moving slowly. Suddenly, a group of martial artists in green robes blocks their path with a loud, theatrical cough. They shamelessly claim they have a companion holding their spot further up in the line. Kang Ki-seok isn't about to be pushed around, calling them out for their blatant lack of manners. One of the men places a hand on Kang's shoulder, telling him to back off if he knows what's good for him. Gu Yongsa introduces himself with a cocky grin, acting as if the name of the Cheongjuk fortress should be enough to make everyone bow. The surrounding crowd murmurs in surprise and fear, clearly recognizing the powerful name he just dropped. The merchant leader immediately loses his spine, bowing and scraping, as he invites the prestigious group to take their spot. Jin So-un watches with a cold eye, the name of the fortress triggering bitter memories from his previous life. He remembers Gu Yongsa as a total degenerate who would later become best friends with the merchant's son, Jai Cheol-yong. In that original timeline, the two of them treated the Tae sect disciples like their own personal servants. Back in the present, Gu Yongsa laughs at the merchant leader's pathetic display, mocking him for being so easily intimidated. His eyes shift to the Tae sect uniforms, and his smirk only grows wider as he spots his next targets. Gu wonders aloud how a sect as lowly as Tae even managed to keep their place among the 108 peaks. He gets right in Kang Ki-seok's face, suggesting that the Iron Sword sect will soon be taking their spot anyway. Suddenly, Jin So-un cuts in, acting bored as he purposely fumbles the name of Gu's sect. Gu Yongsa's smile vanishes, replaced by a look of pure, murderous disbelief. The merchant leader's face turns pale as he tries to correct Jin's mistake before the situation explodes. The other merchants are equally horrified, unable to believe someone would have the audacity to mock the Cheongjuk fortress. Jin So-un doesn't stop, asking with a fake innocent grin if he heard the name Cheongjuk while visiting an outhouse. Gu Yongsa is shaking with rage, his pride completely shattered in front of the entire crowd. His hand drops to the hilt of his sword, no longer interested in a verbal spat. With a roar of fury, he draws his blade, fully intending to strike Jin down where he stands. But the sudden sound of steady footsteps on the stone pavement cuts through the tension. A woman's voice, cold and commanding, demands to know what all the commotion is about. The crowd's hostility instantly turns into hushed reverence as they recognize the person who has just arrived. The woman steps forward, her presence alone enough to make everyone in the area go silent. This is Seong Murim, the famed, beautiful wolf Iron Sword and granddaughter of the Iron Sword sect leader. Her family, the Iron Sword sect, is an emerging power that only appeared a mere 150 years ago. Because they settled in the same city of Afei, they were naturally at odds with the older Tae sect. Their ultimate goal was to trample over the outdated Tae sect and seize their status for themselves. Jin So-un remembers this exact day from his past life, before his regression changed everything. In that original timeline, he had been goaded into a fight with Seong Mo-hyun, the sect leader's arrogant grandson. He had accepted the duel despite knowing he'd lose, all for the sake of defending his sect's honor. To save his son from a cruel fate, his father, Jin Tae-san, had been forced to kneel and beg for mercy in front of everyone. Jin So-eun's eyes harden as he looks at the gates. He won't let his father's dignity be crushed like that again. Seong Morin walks closer in the present, her eyes sweeping over the tense standoff between the two groups. She asks Gu Yongsa point-blank if he came to her grandfather's party specifically to shed blood. Cowed by her authority, Gu Yongsa's bravado evaporates, while the merchant's son can only stare at her in a daze. The Cheongjuk bully tries to deflect, pointing a shaking finger at Jin and blaming him for the entire mess. Morin shuts him down instantly, stating that line-cutting isn't allowed before offering a formal apology to the others. To everyone's shock, she offers to personally escort the Tae sect and the merchant group inside as compensation. As they follow her into the inner grounds, the earlier tension begins to fade into the background. Jai Cheolyong immediately tries to flirt, claiming that rumors of her beauty didn't do her enough justice. Morin remains professional and dismissive, leading them toward the main hall where the banquet is being held. Jin So-eun watches her closely, his mind racing as he processes this unexpected turn of events. He knows for a fact that she never interacted with his sect in the past, making him realize how much things have already changed. As they reach the massive building, Jin So-eun can't help but wonder if Seong Morin has a hidden motive for being so helpful. Hong Saryun is wide-eyed at the sheer scale of the sect, while Kang Ki-seok notes how much it has grown over the years. Seong Morin leads them inside, but Jin So-eun remains on high alert, certain that their hospitality isn't without reason. The group enters the grand banquet hall, which is already filled with the boisterous laughter of the Iron Sword sect's elite. At the head of the room sits Seong Chenwal, the Iron Sword sect leader, who seems to be enjoying himself immensely. Beside him stands his son, Seong Jutak, the young sect leader who carries himself with an air of cold superiority. The merchant leader, Jai Yeonseok, immediately offers a respectful greeting to the two powerful men. Seong Jutak laughs heartily, welcoming the merchant and his son as if they were old friends. The atmosphere is thick with fake joviality, as the leaders and the merchant group exchange flowery pleasantries. Seong Jutak goes as far as to say he's jealous of the Tae sect for having the merchant group's support, acting as if the Tae sect is unworthy of it. Seong Morin steps forward to introduce her father to the guests from the Tae sect. The young sect leader's friendly mask slips for a moment, his gaze turning sharp and dismissive at the mention of Tae. Maintaining their dignity, Kang Ki-seok and Jin Taesun offer a formal bow to the leaders of the house. Seong Jutak's eyes linger on Jin Taesun, musing about how 20 years have passed since a certain incident. Jin So-eun catches the remark, his curiosity piqued by the mention of a past event he knows nothing about. Jutak casually asks after sect leader Hong before turning his attention to the younger disciples brought along. Upon hearing that Jin So-eun is the external hall leader's son, Jutak doesn't hide his disdain, calling the children's potential underwhelming. He blatantly insults the Tae sect, advising the merchant leader not to waste time with such useless people. Seong Morin watches the interaction silently, her expression unreadable as her father continues his verbal assault. He mocks the Tae sect's martial arts, laughing at the idea of anyone becoming more than a third-rate fighter by studying them. Jutak begins to turn away, clearly satisfied with having humiliated the guests in front of the crowd. But he is stopped in his tracks when Jin So-eun speaks up, flatly stating that every word coming out of Jutak's mouth is annoying. The room goes silent as Jutak whips around, his face contorted with shock and fury at the boy's audacity. Jin So-eun offers a mock apology, claiming the insult just slipped out, before boldly asking if anyone can deny the truth of his words. Jin So-eun points out the guy's hypocrisy, noting how he acted all friendly with the Tae sect leader just moments ago. He continues by calling the man out for prying into other sects' business and trashing their martial arts. Jin asks sarcastically if anyone wouldn't be pissed off hearing that kind of talk. He follows up with a fake-sounding apology, claiming that even rude people deserve courtesy according to the sages. In the crowd, someone laughs that this bold kid actually called the Iron Sword sect a bunch of back-alley hooligans. A nearby elder narrows his eyes, clearly unhappy with the spectacle. The guy Jin insulted is fuming, calling him a bastard through gritted teeth. Jin just looks him dead in the eye and asks if he's planning to ignore the apology. The man's grip tightens until his cup literally shatters in his hand. He loses it, screaming at the ill-mannered brat while raising a pitcher to strike. Suddenly, a messenger bursts in shouting that the Murim Alliance's chief strategist has just arrived. The entire banquet hall descends into chaos as everyone abandons their drama to go greet the VIP. One of the sect leaders urges his group to hurry up so they can pay their respects too. A swarm of people starts sprinting toward the entrance. Jin's father tells Qiaoyang to pick up the pace and follow him. The elder with wild white hair orders his subordinates to bring out the prepared gifts immediately. The angry guy huffs and storms off with the crowd, leaving the Taeyi group behind. Hong Saryon asks if they should go too, but Jin says it's better to just snag a good seat while everyone else is busy brown-nosing. A hand suddenly grabs Jin by the back of his neck. It's Kang Ki-seok, and he is absolutely livid that Jin talked like that to the Iron Sword sect's young master. He keeps yelling, demanding that Jin be honest about his reckless behavior. He knows that if he hadn't stepped in, Jin was ready to draw his sword right then and there. Kang Ki-seok explains that the other guy was probably just babbling, hoping someone would give him an excuse to fight. He begs Jin to stop jumping into messes and just act like a gentleman for once. Jin ignores the scolding and asks what exactly happened 20 years ago to make him so cautious. His father goes silent, looking away as if the memory is too painful to touch. Kang Ki-seok winces, clearly troubled by the reminder of the past. Seong Morin suddenly appears with a bright smile, suggesting they continue their chat inside. Kang Ki-seok immediately changes his tone, thanking her and dragging the group along before they cause more trouble. She leads them to a VIP area with a perfect view of a massive, beautiful lotus pond. The table is stacked with delicacies they usually couldn't even dream of eating. Hong Saryon is completely confused about why the Iron Sword sect is treating them this well. While Morin asks for Jin's name, he just focuses on destroying a chicken leg. She laughs when Jin asks why she isn't with the others, saying women aren't usually invited to the important stuff anyway. The young sect leader has 2 children, starting with the notorious blood wolf, Seong Mo-hyun. Then there's his sister, the beautiful wolf, Seong Morin. Mo-hyun grew up with every single resource the sect had to offer. Because of that, he's seen as the one who will eventually inherit everything. On the flip side, Morin didn't even start training internal energy until she was 9, but she's a total genius. Jin continues eating, nodding the rumors that her teeth are actually sharper than her brother's. Morin is amused by his knowledge, asking if he's that interested in her. Kang Ki-seok and Jin's father is too busy drinking to care, while Morin apologizes for her dad's behavior earlier. Jin So-eun brings up his history with the Jai-ryong merchant group, suggesting they probably regret losing brother Qiaoyang. He casually tells the young lady she could just take him even now, before switching to a more serious question. He asks straight out what the Iron Sword sect's real intention was behind inviting the Taeyi sect. Seong Morin just gives him a mysterious smile. She tries to play it off, asking if banquets aren't just meaningful celebrations for everyone. Jin So-eun counters that historically, banquets are actually the perfect setting for assassinations. Her gaze lingers on him for a silent moment. She laughs and calls him an interesting guy before excusing herself from the table. She gives a polite bow as she heads out. She walks away, leaving the group in silence. Hong Saryon is clearly annoyed by the whole interaction and lets out a huff. Outside, the banquet lanterns are glowing as someone greets the exceptionally beautiful young lady Seong. A group of blushing disciples asks if she'd care to join their table. Another guy jumps in, begging her to sit with him instead. Nearby, a servant is shouting for the young lady at the top of her lungs. She's frantically searching, explaining that the young master is urgently looking for Morin. Morin has actually escaped to the roof, finally feeling like she can breathe away from all those men. She thinks back to Jin So-eun, finding it interesting how confident he was even with such negligible internal power. He didn't even flinch in front of her father or her brother, the young sect leader. She wonders if he's genuinely fearless or just completely out of his mind. While munching on a snack, she spots something unusual down below. She sees Hong Saryun and Jai Cheolyong walking together and wonders where they're heading. She remembers her brother mentioning a private gathering for the young disciples tonight. She's confused why only those two are going, and if Jin So-won is planning to follow. A mischievous smirk crosses her face as she thinks about the potential drama. A knock sounds on a door later that night. Jin So-won pulls the door open, looking completely caught off guard. He's stunned to see Murim standing there in the dark, wondering what could possibly bring her by so late. A knock at the door late at night. Jin So-won pulls the door open. Seong Murim is standing there with a smile. She invites him to a banquet meant for the young stars of the Murim. Jin tells her he's going to have to pass. He says he and the other disciples are wiped out from the day's events. Murim just lets out a little laugh. She tells him she already saw his junior sister, Hong Gilei, heading there. Jin remembers how this banquet went in his past life. It was a disaster that brought nothing but shame to his father and the sect. He was planning on skipping out this time to avoid the same mess. But since Hong is already there, he doesn't have a choice. He can't leave her in a place where his enemies might have laid a trap. They start walking, but Murim stops when he voices his suspicion. She asks if he really thinks her sect would stoop so low. Jin turns back, wondering if she's just acting or really that oblivious. She pointed out that, regardless, her sect never allows women to be involved in anything of importance. He says it's no wonder she has no idea what her own people are plotting. A cold breeze blows through the trees as the mood sours. Murim snaps at him, saying the Iron Sword sect aren't common thugs. Jin just gives her a sharp, mocking grin. He predicts her brother is going to use this banquet to trample his sect. He says they're planning on making the Tae sect a total laughingstock. Murim scoffs, calling him a paranoid lunatic. Jin just keeps walking toward the banquet hall. The building is lit up and buzzing with noise. Inside, one of the guests is standing up and making a scene. He's loudly mocking the Tae sect for still holding a spot in the top 108 peaks. Jai Cheolyong watches as the insults turn toward his merchant group. The rest of the table finds the mockery hilarious. Hong Gilei sits there with her head down, taking the abuse. The guy raises his cup, looking for more attention. He demands to hear the Tae sect's stance on the matter. He calls them nothing but rotten water that needs to be cleared out. Hong is shaking, sweating through the humiliation. She's so tense she's practically tearing her own clothes. Suddenly, a hand slams a bowl onto the table as someone sits down. The room goes silent as they recognize Jin from earlier that day. The loudmouth tries to invite Murim to sit by him instead. Jin just asks for another drinking table to be brought out. The guy is fuming that he's being treated like a servant. Jin asks him if a real senior brother would just sit back and watch his sect get insulted. Hong Gilei tries to jump in and stop the fight before it gets even worse. Jai Cheolyong is sweating bullets, hoping he doesn't get dragged into the mess. Jin So-won scans the room, completely ignoring the guy shouting in his face. He notices that the two biggest players in the room haven't even looked his way. One of them is Namgung-san, a top-tier genius from the prestigious Namgung family. The other is Seong Mo-hyun, the high-ranking blood wolf of the Iron Sword sect. The guy looks like he's already decided how this night is going to end. Young Master Gu keeps blabbing, trying to save face after being ignored. He mocks Jin, acting like he's doing him a favor by talking to him. He asks if Jin is planning on being his sister's mouthpiece for the rest of the night. Jin doesn't even blink. He just grabs a leg of meat and takes a massive bite. Gu is visibly shaking with rage at the blatant disrespect. Jin keeps chewing, making it clear he doesn't value a word the guy is saying. He mentions that a pond only stays clear if the new water coming in is clean. He points out that the Cheongjuk fortress hasn't exactly been rising in the ranks. He says it's because they've spent too much time bootlicking the Murim alliance. Then he drops the bomb about the Cheongjuk blood affair, a scandal from 60 years ago. Gu's face goes totally pale as his secret history is dragged into the light. Jin explains how their own people turned on each other for a title. He calmly pours a drink while the rest of the room goes silent. He says nobody in their right mind would want an ally who stabs their own in the back. He slams the cup down to drive the point home. He gives Gu a mocking little wink. The other guests are actually laughing now, and Gu is the butt of the joke. Gu snaps and lunges across the table, grabbing Jin's robes. He screams about Jin bringing up a disgrace that should have stayed buried. Jin just looks at him like he's a bug, asking what he thinks he's doing. Seong Mo-hyun finally decides to step in and act like the adult in the room. He claims he won't allow such disrespect toward a guest at his banquet. He makes it clear that insulting his guests is the same as insulting his sect. Murim is confused since Gu was the one who started all of this. But her brother tells her to shut up and stay out of it. Hong Gilei is terrified that her brother is about to get killed. She tries to bow and take all the blame herself to end the confrontation. Jin catches her before she can humble herself any further. He puts on a show of submission, offering a fake apology to the host. Murim is shocked to see him backing down after being so aggressive. He even apologizes to Gu for recklessly bringing up his sect's past. Gu stares him down, trying to figure out why he's suddenly playing nice. Jin tells Hong it's time for them to leave. As they turn to walk away, Mo-hyun tells them to wait. Seong Mo-hyun stops Jin in his tracks, telling him he can't leave after such an insult. He emphasizes his high status as the grandson of the Iron Sword sect's leader. He makes it clear that a simple apology isn't going to fix the damage to his sect's reputation. With a menacing laugh, he officially challenges Jin to a sparring match right then and there. Murim is absolutely terrified, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden escalation. A dark thought flashes through Jin's mind as he realizes there's no way out of this. It feels as if some invisible hand is pushing him toward a destiny he can't avoid. But instead of backing down, Jin just smiles, like he's finally gotten what he wanted. Murim watched on, her heart sinking as she realized that everything Jin said about her brother was completely accurate. Mo-hyun is practically vibrating with bloodlust as he issues the formal challenge. Jin So-won stays calm, his internal monologue confirming that his plan is working. Later that night, Gilei is yelling at him for being reckless enough to accept. Kang Ki-seok asked with interest, curious to see how the junior planned to deal with the challenges ahead. Jin So-won snaps back, pointing out that Mo-hyun would have targeted Gilei otherwise. Gilei surprisingly takes So-won's side, which only makes their father even more frustrated. Jin So-won looks exhausted by the constant scolding and worry from his family. Gilei warns him that Mo-hyun is a killer and that this match is a death sentence. She's on the verge of a breakdown, terrified that her brother is about to die. Jin tries to calm her down with a silly face and some goofy reassurances. He tells her he has a plan and that she should start thinking about his victory party. The elders of the sect are horrified that he's making jokes while his sister is crying. Jin Bayam stared at the wall in deep thought, wrapped in cold silence, while the Tae Hall leader kept lecturing the junior without a break. So-won stared directly at his father's retreating back, pleading for his trust and promising that he could handle everything. The hall leader standing nearby was struggling with a mix of fury and fear for So-won's life. In the end, he just turns away with a sigh, giving up on trying to talk sense into him. Jin So-won watches him go, his expression turning serious as the playful mask slips away. He tells his father not to worry, sounding more like a veteran than a young disciple. The scene shifts to the next day at the headquarters of the Iron Sword sect. Hong Gilei is running through the halls, desperately searching for her brother. She's shouting that something terrible has happened involving their father. Jin So-won stops cold, his face paling as he realizes what his father has done. He drops everything and sprints toward the training grounds, his heart pounding. He was worried that his father would try to sacrifice himself to save him. As he reaches the grounds, he sees that his worst fears have been realized. A massive crowd of disciples is already there, whispering about the fearless punk. In the middle of the courtyard, Jin Bam is kneeling in the dirt, completely humiliated. The Iron Sword sect leader, Xiang Chenwal, looks down from his high throne. Standing beside him is the young sect leader, Xiang Jutak, enjoying the display of submission. Jegal Samyang, the Murim Alliance's top strategist, watches the scene with a sharp eye. He realizes the Iron Sword sect is using this to crush the Tiyul sect once and for all. Jin Bayam slams his head against the ground, begging for forgiveness for his son's sin. Xiang Chenwal doesn't look moved at all, coldly asking to hear about the sin. Xiang Chenwal points out that Jin Bayam's apologies can't erase the insults his son hurled at the Iron Sword sect. He smirks, nodding the resemblance between father and son, and hinting at a shared history from 20 years ago. Jin So-un bursts onto the scene, shouting in shock at the sight of his father debasing himself. He stands at the edge of the training ground, staring in horror as his father grovels before the sect's leaders. Ignoring the high-ranking officials, Jin So-un walks straight to his father and begs him to stand up. He demands to know why his father is acting like a common criminal when he has done nothing wrong. Jin Bayam tells his son to be quiet, his voice thick with the pain of seeing his child targeted by such powerful enemies. Jin So-un refuses to listen, declaring that no son could bear to see his father humiliated like this. With a cold, hard look in his eyes, he tells Jin Bayam to step aside and let him handle it. On the ground, Jin Bayam's fist trembles, his knuckles white with a mixture of shame and suppressed rage. Xiang Mo-hyun watches the family drama with sadistic amusement, mocking their display of paternal love. With a cruel grin, he offers a deal. He'll spare Jin So-un if the boy joins his father on his knees. A metallic ring echoes through the courtyard as a hand tightens around a sword hilt. Jin So-un unsheathes his blade in one fluid motion, telling his father that the time for words has passed. He looks down at his father's bloodied forehead, repeating that apologies are now completely useless. Turning his back on his father, Jin So-un focuses all his attention on the enemies standing before him. He wants to prove once and for all that his threats aren't empty and that he has the strength to back them up. Jin Bayam can only watch in despair, calling his son a fool for walking straight into the lion's den. Jin So-un promises his father that he won't let him down, urging him to simply watch the coming fight. The sun shines down on the arena, the calm sky contrasting with the lethal tension on the ground. Mo-hyun beckons with a single finger, his body language oozing arrogance and confidence. He taunts Jin So-un, challenging him to show off the legendary techniques of his struggling sect. Despite the odds, Jin So-un holds his stance, even though he knows Mo-hyun has had every advantage in life. Mo-hyun readies his massive, heavy blade, a weapon designed to crush the nimble and light style of the Tiyul sect. Jin So-un goes on the offensive, hopping to catch his opponent off guard with pure speed. Xiang Mo-hyun narrows his eyes, clearly surprised by the sudden burst of momentum. Their swords clash with a massive spray of sparks, neither side giving an inch. Mo-hyun tightens his grip, calling his opponent a little rat for scurrying around. The duel turns into a blur of metal and motion as they trade rapid-fire blows across the arena. Mo-hyun swings his heavy blade in a crushing arc, forcing Jin back. The ground shatters under the weight of the impact, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Watching from the sidelines, the Iron Sword sect leader scoffs, thinking the rumors about Taeyi's lack of talent were right. Mo-hyun sneers, asking if that's really all the kid has to offer. Jin grinds his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as the pressure starts to mount. The antagonist stands tall, mocking the Taeyi sect for being nothing special. Jin slams his foot down and tells him to shut up, his temper finally starting to fray. They collide again in the center of the ring, the air practically humming from the force. Mo-hyun keeps the pressure on, grinning widely while Jin struggles to keep his guard up. Jin realizes just how absurdly strong this guy is. He's not just a loudmouth. Mo-hyun leans in with a twisted smile, bringing up a man from the past who was just like him. Jin's eyes go wide, a cold realization washing over him as he listens. He's told that years ago, a man who didn't know his place lost a duel against the Iron Sword sect. For his disrespect, That man was punished with the flat of a red-hot blade. He was branded like cattle across his entire body, chest, back, and abdomen. With a cruel laugh, Mo-hyun reveals the name of the man they humiliated. It was Jin Tae-sun, the legendary ancestor of the Tae sect. The image of his branded ancestor flashes through Jin's mind, a heavy weight of shame his family has carried for years. He stands there dazed, the psychological blow landing harder than any physical strike. He saw his father's face in his mind, staring straight at the disgrace he was now forced to face. Taking advantage of the distraction, Mo-hyun lands a brutal kick right to Jin's chest. The impact sends him skidding across the stone floor, gasping for air. The hall leader and his junior sister scream out in terror as they watch him go down. Mo-hyun watches with amusement as Jin struggles to pick himself up, his body battered. Mo-hyun laughs, saying the boy inherited the same lack of brains as his father. The spectators join in the mockery, calling the Tae sect pathetic for failing so miserably. The elders smile arrogantly, convinced that history is simply repeating itself today. Jin stands with his back to them, asking if that's really what everyone thinks. He takes a long, deep breath, centering himself as the noise of the crowd fades away. Suddenly, he lunges forward with a roar, launching into the first form of his sect's technique again. Mo-hyun is annoyed, thinking he's just repeating the same useless move. But this time is different. Jin moves with a precision that defies the laws of physics. A shallow cut opens up on Mo-hyun's face, catching him completely off guard. Jin's look turns cold as he prepares to show them the real power of his memory. He unleashes a flurry of slashes, his movements becoming a perfect execution of martial theory. Panicking, Mo-hyun swings wildly, trying to swat away the little rat, who's suddenly dangerous. In Jin's mind, the world transforms into a vast library of glowing blue manuals, revealing every weakness in the enemy's style. Mo-hyun swings his massive blade in a desperate arc, demanding to know what kind of trick Jin is using. The purple-haired brute grinds his teeth, his eyes wide with frustration as his heavy attacks fail to land. Jin's eyes glow with a cold blue light as he prepares to show everyone the true potential of his sect. He unleashes the lesser heaven sword technique, his movements becoming a blur of perfect, lethal precision. Executing the first basic form with absolute mastery, Jin closes the distance in a flash. Mo-hyun is left completely stunned, blood spraying from fresh wounds as the tide of the battle shifts. Jin stands tall, looking down with indifference at the opponent who dared to insult his family. Coughing up blood, Mo-hyun collapses under the weight of his own massive sword. Jin flashes a confident grin, mocking the strength of the Iron Sword sect as he prepares to rewrite history. Seong Mo-hyun is breathing hard, blood already leaking from a fresh cut on his cheek. Jin So-won just stares him down, completely unfazed by the exchange. Mo-hyun collapsed to his knees, slamming his greatsword into the arena floor as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The guy is losing his mind, screaming about how an insignificant bug shouldn't be able to do this. He raises his sword high, accusing Jin of using cheap tricks to avoid a real fight. He brings it down with everything he's got, the mountain-shattering sword technique. The floor practically explodes. A massive cloud of dust kicks up, blinding everyone in the arena. The crowd is leaning in, trying to see if Jin actually survived that blast. Mo-hyun stands over the crater, convinced he finally squashed the competition. He lunges forward again, still shouting insults through the haze. But Jin is already on the move, parrying the heavy blade with surgical precision. Mo-hyun grits his teeth, realizing his strength isn't doing much against this kind of speed. Jin looks bored, his eyes tracking every desperate swing without breaking a sweat. He lands a flurry of strikes, the metallic clashing ringing out through the dust cloud. Up in the stands, the Iron Sword sect leader is starting to sweat. He can't believe what he's seeing. Jegel Samyang just smiles, nodding the massive gap in real combat experience between the two. The crowd starts whispering. It's getting harder to ignore that a small sect is making the Iron Sword look like amateurs. Jin thinks back to the long chain of humiliation his family has suffered. This is about more than just a win. He knows simply winning this match won't be enough to truly settle the score. Mo-hyun charges in blindly, shouting that Jin's rat-like flukes are over. His eyes are wide with pure desperation now, his form completely falling apart. Jin flows around him like a ghost, parrying and countering in one smooth motion. He moves his hand into position, and for a split second everything slows down. Mo-hyun looks like he's seen a monster. He has no idea how he's being countered so easily. He screams about trickery, swinging that heavy blade with zero control. Jin decides it's time to end this and take things to the next level. He prepares his final strike, telling Mo-hyun to just wait and watch. He declares that after today, the Iron Sword sect will be crawling beneath their feet forever. The spectators are frozen, completely stunned by the sheer arrogance and skill on display. Mo-hyun's face is a mask of pure terror as he realizes he's actually losing. Jin looks down, his face hidden in shadow as he finishes the sequence. The massive greatsword slips from Mo-hyun's hands and slams into the arena floor. The two stand apart, the silence in the arena almost louder than the fight. Mo-hyun is gasping for air, his face covered in dirt and his own blood. He can't believe it. The blood wolf of the iron sword actually dropped his weapon. He grips the hilt on the ground, his hand shaking with rage and humiliation. With a desperate scream, he lunges forward again, trying one last time to salvage his pride. But he's already spent. Jin just sidesteps him, letting him tumble past. He faceplants hard into the concrete, the impact echoing through the stadium. He's barely conscious now, blood dripping from his mouth as he gasps for air. The Iron Sword sect leader looks like he's about to explode from the shame. Mo-hyun tries to pick himself up, but his legs just won't listen anymore. Mo-hyun swings that massive slab of iron again, shouting that Jin shouldn't make him laugh, but Jin just flows right around it. He slips past the heavy blade, moving with a speed that makes it look like he's barely trying. The greatsword slams into the arena floor, sending up a shower of sparks and stone. Mo-hyun's eyes are wide with panic. He can't understand how he keeps missing. He looks down at his hand, which is shaking uncontrollably. It feels like his internal energy is being cut off every time he tries to use a technique. The guy is falling apart. He can barely even hold the weight of his own sword anymore. Jin So-un just looks down at him, coldly pointing out that his training and internal energy is clearly lacking. Mo-hyun gets sent flying back, gritting his teeth at the pure absurdity of being pushed back like this. He's fuming. He's taken every top-tier elixir the Iron Sword sect has to offer, yet he's still being outclassed. He hits the ground hard, unable to fathom that he's being beaten in raw internal power. Jin stands tall, watching his opponent struggle to even get back on his feet. Suddenly, Mo-hyun remembers the moment Jin touched him earlier. He thinks he's finally figured out the trick. In his mind, he sees the moment of impact and convinces himself it wasn't a normal strike. He points a finger and screams sorcery, unable to accept his own defeat. He's sweating, shouting to everyone that Jin is using a forbidden technique from the demonic cult. Jin just stares at him with a blank expression, letting the guy dig his own grave with these wild accusations. A booming voice echoes through the arena, calling for the match to stop. Enough is enough. The Iron Sword sect leader steps onto the floor, his face a mask of stern authority. Mo-hyun crawls toward his grandfather, desperate for someone to believe his lies about sorcery. Jin stands his ground, watching the drama unfold without flinching. Mo-hyun yells it out for the whole crowd to hear. He claims Jin has learned the forbidden heaven-devouring art. The disciples in the stand start whispering in shock. If that's true, Jin is as good as dead. The arena falls into a tense silence as the sect leader stands over his humiliated grandson. The Tae sect elder finally speaks up, reminding everyone that accusations of forbidden arts aren't things you just throw around. He warns that while sorcerers are punished, those who make false accusations face an even harsher fate from the Murim alliance. Mo-hyun looks up with a manic grin, convinced his plan to frame Jin is working perfectly. Jegel Samyang was certain that the Iron Sword sect leader must be feeling deeply conflicted at this moment. Someone in the crowd mutters that the whole scene is just incredibly pathetic to watch. Jin stands alone against the two of them, looking like he's ready for whatever comes next. He speaks up, reminding them that he even tried to hold back when they were insulting his sect earlier. He points out that he even offered an apology just to avoid this mess, but they wouldn't let it go. Mo-hyun just grits his teeth, his real motives as plain as day to everyone watching. The guy was clearly just trying to humiliate the Tae sect to steal their spot in the 108 peaks. Jin clenches his fist, declaring that he only accepted this match to prove his sect's worth through skill alone. Murim looks on from the side, horrified that things have escalated to talk of forbidden techniques. Jin So-won looks up with a piercing gaze, telling them straight up that a sect this petty doesn't deserve to lead anyone. Jegul Samyang smirks to himself, deciding it might be fun to watch this play out just a bit longer. The other disciples are starting to turn, whispering that the Iron Sword sect is just acting out of pure jealousy. Mo-hyun is shaking on the ground, realizing he's completely trashed his sect's reputation with this outburst. He slams his hand down, screaming his own name as if it still carries any weight. Murim watches him make a fool of himself, yelling at his grandfather that losing shouldn't be possible. He rants that unless it's sorcery, there's no way a genius like him could ever lose to a nobody. The Iron Sword sect leader listens, as his grandson claims his energy was being drained during the entire match. He looks at Mo-hyun with a heavy gaze, promising to deal with him if these claims of sorcery turn out to be lies. Mo-hyun screams that he'll gladly accept any punishment if he's lying. He's leaning into the deception with everything he's got. The old man lets out a long, weary sigh, clearly tired of the drama even as he prepares to act on it. He steps forward and declares that the sparring match is over right then and there. Jin So-won pushes back, asking by what right he stops a match that's already been decided, but the leader insists on inspecting Jin's body for signs of sorcery. Jin calls them out, asking if they're just trying to frame the Tae sect because they failed to make the 108 peaks ranking. Mo-hyun just smirks like a villain, enjoying the chaos he's managed to create. The sect leader snaps, screaming at Jin to shut up and claiming his resistance only makes him look more suspicious. He threatens to check Jin's body immediately, and then drag the whole Tae sect before the Murim alliance. Seong screamed out, "Father," and the disciples below were in an uproar. The crowd watches in horror as the confrontation reaches a breaking point. Jin So-won drew his blade, declaring that he was ready to lay down his life for the honor of his sect. He called upon his father, his fellow disciples, and everyone present to put their trust in him. Jin Baeum, his father, looks on with an expression of pure agony and regret. Jin addresses the Iron Sword sect leader directly, calling him by his title as hall leader. He demands that if he dies or is crippled, no one should touch his body until official investigators from the Murim alliance arrive to see the truth. With a formal declaration of his name and sect, Jin prepares for a fight that could very well be his last. His hand grips the hilt, energy beginning to swirl around him as he stands against the Iron Sword sect schemes. Jin draws his sword with incredible intensity, his eyes glowing with a cold, blue light. He issues a formal challenge to the Iron Sword sect leader himself for a sparring match to settle the score. The disciples in the crowd are absolutely stunned by the sheer audacity of a young man challenging a sect leader. The Iron Sword sect leader is beyond furious, his face twisted in rage as he calls Jin a brat. He releases a massive wave of internal energy, the sheer pressure cracking the ground beneath him. The shockwave is so powerful it knocks back several nearby observers, sending dust and stones flying. Jin's father and another leader rush in to intervene, blocking the sect leader's path. Jin is shocked to see them step in, calling out to his father and the hall leader in surprise. The man tells Jin to stay back, scolding him for acting like an adult when he's still just a snot-nosed brat. Jin looks at his father's back, nodding that no parent would ever want to send their child to die first. The Iron Sword leader lunges forward, determined to end the Tae sect's legacy right here and now. Everyone watching is terrified as the elder powerhouse prepares to strike. Suddenly, a single calm word echoes through the arena, "Stop!" It's Jegel Samyang, the chief strategist. He stands between the two sides, his presence alone halting the clash as the wind whips around his silver hair. The strategist commands everyone to sheath their swords, and his voice carries an authority no one can ignore. The entire arena is stunned to see the chief strategist himself stepping into the fray. He looks directly at Jin So-un, telling him that he needs to put his weapon away as well. Jin stares him down, his face full of blood and dirt, and flatly refuses to sheath his sword. The Iron Sword leader is outraged at Jin's disrespect toward the chief strategist of the Murim alliance. The strategist remains calm, simply asking Jin for the reason behind his defiance. Jin explains that the Iron Sword sect used this match to insult his people and frame him for using forbidden arts. He looks the strategist in the eye and asks how he's supposed to trust an official who let this happen. The strategist starts walking down the stairs, calling Jin's actions insolent but acknowledging his bravery. He reminds the young martial artist that his own words carry the full weight of the Murim alliance itself. Jin So-un stands his ground, blade drawn and ready, as Jegel Samyang, the chief strategist, admits he was so amused by the display that he missed the perfect moment to intervene. The strategist looks down at the young man with a calm, analytical gaze and asks him simply, "What is it that you want?" Jin So-un speaks with a quiet, burning intensity, his voice steady despite the blood and dirt on his face. With eyes that reflect a cold, unbreakable resolve, he makes his demand clear. He wants the head of the Iron Sword sect leader. The strategist lets out a small, dry chuckle at the sheer audacity of the request. A bold move, he thinks to himself. He realizes that by demanding a duel, Jin is cornering his opponents. Even if the boy loses, the political fallout will be disastrous for the Iron Sword sect. Jin stands tall, knowing that if he dies in this match, he will be honored as a martyr who gave everything for his sect and family. The Iron Sword sect would be branded as a group of scoundrels who bullied the weak, leading to their inevitable political downfall within the alliance. The strategist smiles, clearly finding this high-stakes gamble by a snot-nosed brat to be incredibly entertaining. He turns his focus to the Iron Sword sect leader, questioning just how certain he is of his grandson's claims of sorcery. "Are you willing to bet your sect's signboard?" he asks. The sect leader scoffs at the suggestion, arguing that rooting out forbidden arts is merely his natural duty as a Murim alliance member. He insists that if he must take responsibility for his grandson's words, he will do so with his own blade. The strategist considers this for a moment, stroking his beard thoughtfully before countering with a much higher price. He asks the sect leader if he's prepared to put his sect's most precious divine weapon on the line for this match. Jin looks on in shock, not expecting the strategist to force such a heavy burden onto the Iron Sword sect. The weapon in question is the Ninefold Sword, a legendary blade said to have been used by the Iron Sword sect's very founder. It is a treasure passed down through every generation of leaders, representing the sect's history and power. The sect leader breaks into a cold sweat, panicking as he realizes the strategist is actually serious about betting his sect's most sacred heirloom. The strategist begins to walk, his voice dripping with subtle mockery as he asks why a spar is even necessary if they can just examine the boy's dantian to end the suspicion. In the background, a disciple helps the defeated Mo-hyun away as the strategist asks if the sect leader is simply lacking in confidence. With a cold, piercing glare, the strategist wonders aloud if they were just trying to use the alliance's name to commit a despicable act of bullying. The Iron Sword sect leader remains silent, his pride trapped by the strategist's overwhelming presence. Faced with no other choice, the old man bows to the pressure and agrees to the conditions of the match. The strategist turns back toward Jin So-un, asking the young man if he is finally satisfied with the terms of his gamble. Jin So-un stands perfectly still, his expression unreadable as the crowd watches the tension boil over. The chief strategist steps forward, telling him to just relax and not resist the flow of chi. He places his fingers on the boy's arm, a soft pulse of energy beginning to hum between them. A massive burst of light erupts, illuminating the entire stage as the inspection officially begins. Seong Mo-hyun is losing it, screaming at the top of his lungs about a forbidden art. This is what he's talking about, the heaven-devouring art, a technique that cruelly drains the life out of others. The elder remains focused, ignoring the noise as he meticulously scans Jin's internal energy. He shifts his grip, making sure to check every single meridian in the boy's body. The strategist's eyes narrow, but he doesn't say a word. He looks down at the young disciple with a heavy gaze. The crowd waits in dead silence, the other disciples holding their breath for the verdict. Finally, he withdraws his hand and announces that there isn't a single trace of the forbidden art. The Iron Sword sect leader looks like he just saw a ghost. Mo-hyun throws a desperate tantrum, begging his grandfather to believe his lies. The old man's eyes harden as he refuses to believe a small sect could win fairly. Suddenly, he lunges forward, screaming that he needs to check for himself. He grabbed Jin's arm and poured a monstrous amount of internal energy into his body to probe him. Jin grits his teeth as the brutal impact knocks the wind out of him. Everyone shouts in horror at the sudden, violent escalation. A massive spray of blood erupts from Jin's mouth as his body takes the full force of the master's strike. Murim watches in total shock, realizing this could be fatal. Jin collapses backward onto the hard stone, blood pooling around him. His father and the other disciples rush to his side as the arena descends into chaos. The chief strategist glares at the old man, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. The sect leader is sweating now, realizing there really was no trace of sorcery after all. Jin's blood-stained hand rests limp on the floor. Blood drips onto the floor as he gasps for air. From the ground, Jin demands an apology for this despicable act. Mo-hyun is frozen in fear, seeing the consequences of his lies. Murim is in tears, devastated by what her grandfather just did. Jin fixes the old man with a chilling, defiant stare. He tells him clearly that it's time to pay the price for his actions. Every word is a struggle as he demands the proper compensation. He finally passes out, leaving the entire arena in a state of shock. Jegel Samyang looks down, his expression hardening into cold fury. He turns his gaze back to the Iron Sword sect leader. He tells the man to keep his promise. There's no running away from the bet now. Later, everything is quiet in a private, well-kept room. The silence is heavy. Jin's eyes snap open, the fog of unconsciousness finally lifting. He sits up with a shout, his mind still back on the arena floor. A voice notes that he's finally awake, as a hand rests calmly on a nearby book. The chief strategist looks over at him, asking with a knowing smirk if the little show he put on is finally over. We open in a dark, nasty prison cell where rats are the only company. Mo-hyun is absolutely losing it behind bars, screaming that Jin So-un definitely used the forbidden heaven-devouring art. He begs his grandfather to believe him, claiming he's not just making up excuses for his loss. But the Iron Sword sect leader doesn't want to hear it and walks away, telling the kid he still hasn't come to his senses. Mo-hyun reaches out through the bars as his grandfather keeps walking, basically disowning him on the spot. The old man is done with him, telling the foolish boy he won't get a single drop of water until he reflects on his failure. Mo-hyun lets out a desperate scream for his grandfather as the door slams shut. Cut to a much nicer building, where someone asks if the play is finally over. It's Yuj Samyang, and he's sitting in a guest room with Jin So-un, who's chilling in bed. Jin tries to play it cool, whistling and looking away like he doesn't have a clue what the old man is talking about. But he quickly realizes that trying to fool a guy like this is a waste of time. This isn't just any old man. It's the Murim Alliance's chief strategist, Yuj Samyang. In the martial world, everyone knows the name Yang Soa, but in the world of brains and schemes, this guy is the absolute peak. Jin remembers that in his past life, people said this man could have prevented the entire war with the demonic cult if he hadn't died early. Jin stops the act and asks if he really knew everything from the very start. Yuj confirms it, knowing exactly how Jin provoked the Iron Sword sect leader just to get him to step forward. He saw right through the way Jin used him as a shield to avoid having to actually spar with a master. Even that pitiful blood Jin coughed up was just a trick. He just bit the inside of his own mouth to sell the injury. Juge puts down his brush, clearly impressed by how calculating this kid is. He leans in and asks the big question: when did Jin actually start planning this whole trap? Jin goes silent for a moment, looking pretty serious as he considers his answer. The room stays quiet as they have a bit of a mental stare-down through the circular window. Jin's got a single drop of sweat on his face. He knows he's playing with fire here. The strategist just chills and takes a sip of his tea, waiting for the kid to spill the beans. He finally asks Jin if he's suddenly lost his voice. Jin finally makes a move, swinging his bare feet onto the floor. But instead of answering, his eyes lock onto the massive 9-fold sword leaning against the wall. The serious vibe is gone instantly. Jin turns into a total gremlin, drooling over the goods he's about to receive. Juge Samyang is genuinely baffled by how fast this kid flipped from serious to greedy. Jin is already doing the math, wondering just how much cash he can get if he sells this legendary treasure. The strategist calls him a disrespectful brat, shocked that he's even considering pawning off a sect's holy weapon. Jin snaps back to reality and admits it wasn't like he had this planned out for years. He explains that it all started when the Iron Sword sect invited his small-time sect to their banquet. Since he remembers everything from before his regression, he knew exactly what kind of trashy move they were making. He figured that if they were going to pick a fight, he might as well use the opportunity to crush their pride completely. Juge stares at him, realizing the depth of the kid's insight. He asks if Jin even predicted that Mo Hyun would be dumb enough to scream about forbidden arts in public. The old man flips through his notes, still struggling to understand how a kid could manipulate a grown warrior's mind like that. Jin just gives him a deadpan look, saying that giving away any more secrets wouldn't be worth his while. He wraps up the sword, telling the chief strategist that one answer is a fair trade for the help he provided. Juge scoffs, nodding that people usually pay 10,000 gold just to have a conversation with him. Jin retorts that people only pay that much because they expect a bigger return, and Juge realizes the kid is basically saying he has nothing left to learn from him. Exactly. If you have no further questions, I'll be taking my leave. Juge Samyang just stares at him in silence as he gets ready to go. He asks Jin how he expected Seong Moyun to mention the forbidden arts and presents a small box, asking if this would suffice as payment for the answer. Jin gives a small, knowing smirk. Jin explains that it was nothing special. Moyun is just like all outstanding prodigies who can't accept defeat. He says he simply used that arrogance against him, though even he didn't expect the guy to spout nonsense about the heaven-devouring art. He thinks to himself that he actually did use something similar, but luckily the jade dragon bracelet filtered the energy so well that even Juge Samyang didn't notice. His hand glows with the energy of the bracelet as he recalls the examination. Jin asks to check the goods first and starts to open the small chest. His eyes widen when he sees 3 iron heart pills, the legendary spiritual elixirs of the Iron Sword sect. Juge Samyang watches him with a silent, stern expression. He asks Jin why he didn't just win easily if he was so certain of his victory. Jin responds that if he simply won, people would have called it a fluke. He wanted to ensure the Iron Sword sect could never oppress them again. The strategist walks away, as he asks what if he hadn't been there and Jin had been falsely accused until the end. Jin says that if they examined his corpse, it would have proven he hadn't learned forbidden arts, clearing the Taeyi sect's name either way. He stands before the strategist as he asks him why he'd risk his life for something like that. The old man asks if he really risked his life for such a reason. Jin's hand clenches into a tight fist at the question. He looks up with a sharp, determined gaze. He stands tall, facing the strategist directly. The strategist looks at a document with his name on it and asks if Jin really thinks the Taeyi sect lacks honor. Jin looks him in the eye, asking if he thinks just the Taeyi sect lacks something like that. Juge Samyang's stern face breaks into a wide grin. He bursts out laughing, admitting that taking Jin's side is way more entertaining than he expected. Jin watches him, thinking the old man is a total freak. The strategist pulls out another item, offering it as a 2-for-1 special since he's been so entertained. Jin reads the characters on the token, whispering admission. His eyes bulge in absolute shock. Juge Samyang explains that this token allows a disciple to enter the Murim Academy unconditionally, skipping the hellish regular exams. Jin holds the black admission token in his hands, barely believing his eyes. He realizes this means they can send another Taeyi disciple to the academy. He grips the token tightly, his face flushing with excitement and disbelief. He asks if the strategist is really giving this to him. Juge Samyang tells him that after he graduates, he should come work for him at the Mantong Bureau. Jin immediately thinks of the Bureau's reputation for overwork, night shifts, and never getting married. His eyes widen in pure horror at the prospect. The old man starts climbing out the window, ignoring the door that's right next to him. He laughs and tells Jin to hurry up and graduate so he can come play act by his side. Jin screams that he doesn't want to go. The strategist just laughs more, saying the Mantong Bureau is about to get very lively. The next day, we see the gates of the Iron Sword sect. Lady Seong Yahai stands alone under a blooming wisteria tree. Lady Seong Yahai stands under the blooming wisteria, looking down with a troubled expression. Her mind flashes back to the chaos of the previous day, remembering her grandfather's furious accusations and the image of Jin So-eun standing defiant and bloodied. She stammers, lost in her thoughts and regret. Suddenly, a voice whispers right into her ear, asking what she's doing out there all alone, sending her jumping in surprise. She turns to find Jin So-eun standing there with a travel sack slung over his shoulder, a casual look on his face. Her face turns a deep shade of crimson as she fidgets with her sleeves, trying to find the right words. Finally, she blurts out that he was far too reckless in what he did during the match. Jin stops, looking back at her with a questioning gaze, asking exactly what she means by that. Her eyes brim with a mix of concern and frustration as she recalls the danger he put himself in. She looks up at him, the falling petals framing her question as she asks why he felt the need to go that far. Jin's mind briefly flickers back to the night before, where Juge Samyang had asked him a similar question about risking his life for pride. He turns back to Lady Seong, repeating her words with a slight, ironic tilt of his head. He asks if she thinks the Taeyi sect should have just meekly accepted such a miserable humiliation, instead of fighting back. Lady Seong is taken aback by the bluntness of his words, her eyes wide with shock. She quickly tries to explain that's not what she meant, her voice small and filled with conflict. She trails off, unable to find an excuse for her sect's behavior, her head bowing in shame. With a heavy heart, she offers a sincere apology, admitting that her family's actions were wrong. She bites her lip, thinking that if she were in his position, she could never find it in her heart to forgive them. Jin watches her for a moment before telling her that he understands, and asks her to please raise her head. She looks up, startled by the lack of resentment in his voice. He clarifies that while it isn't an apology from the people actually responsible, he will accept it from her. He notes that hopping for a genuine apology from her grandfather, the sect leader, would probably be asking for too much. He stops her as she begins to promise to speak to her grandfather, saying there's no need to keep this cycle of misfortune going. Lady Seong stares at him, her eyes softening as she sees the maturity and grace he possesses. He tells her that if she truly feels sorry, she should take the responsibility to change the Iron Sword sect for the better. He steps forward, his resolve clear as he tells her they shouldn't let things remain as they are now. Jin gives her a bright, genuine smile, reminding her that they are all part of the same Murim alliance. Lady Seong is left breathless by his words, her heart stirring at the weight of his expectations. They stand together under the wisteria tree, a momentary peace settling between the two young martial artists. In contrast, she can't help but think of her brother and grandfather, whose pride still burns with toxic intensity. She looks away, realizing that things only became this complicated because they were too stubborn to utter a single word of apology. Overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment, she begins to sniffle, a few tears escaping despite herself. Jin immediately panics, flailing his hands and telling her that tears really don't suit a warrior like her. Wiping her eyes, she pulls out a small, ornate black box and presents it to him with both hands, asking him to accept it as her sincere feelings. Jin's eyes go wide and round in shock, wondering for a second if today is secretly his birthday. She explains that she knows this isn't enough to make up for what the Iron Sword sect has done. She hopes that the Tae sect and the Iron Sword sect can have a better relationship in the future, and offers the gift as a sign of that hope. Jin carefully opens the latch of the box, and his jaw nearly hits the floor when he sees what's inside. It is the Steel Protection Pill, a legendary elixir reserved only for the direct descendants of the Iron Sword sect. He realizes this is a spiritual treasure far superior to even the Iron Heart pills he received earlier, and that even for her, it must have been incredibly difficult to obtain. Lady Xiang gives him a radiant, hopeful smile, saying she looks forward to their next meeting being filled with smiles. Jin bows deeply in return, a warm grin on his face as he echoes her hope for a brighter future between them. A few days later, the group finally arrives back at the gates of the Tae sect. Jin So-won barely has time to step through the entrance before his eyes widen in surprise at the reception waiting for him. SOWON, Senior Brother Jin. A chaotic crowd of young disciples rushes forward to greet him, with their voices rising in a joyous cheer. The sound of their excitement fills the air as they bowl over their returning hero in a flurry of activity. Jin is quickly pinned to the ground by the eager children, who bombard him with questions about the rumors and his legendary ninefold sword technique. As he struggles to sit up, he notices another disciple, Yunho, standing nearby with a conflicted look on his face. Yunho scratches his head, looking down at his senior brother with a mix of awkwardness and sincerity. Jin jokingly asks if he wants a piggyback ride too, but Yunho solemnly admits that he used to regret joining the Tae sect. Jin listens quietly as Yunho explains how he could never defend the sect when outsiders mocked their weak, lesser heaven sword technique. Yunho looks back on Jin's performance, stating that those feelings are gone now. Thanks to Jin, he is truly proud to be a disciple. Gripping the hilt of his sword with newfound determination, Yunho vows to pour everything into his training from now on. With a slight blush of embarrassment, he declares his goal to become a much greater disciple of the Tae sect. He looks Jin in the eye and promises to be just like him, while the sect leader and hall leaders watch the touching moment. Touched by the younger boy's passion, Jin places a hand over his heart, feeling the weight of the boy's respect. Jin gives Yunho a bright, encouraging grin, telling the boy that he'll be looking forward to seeing his progress. Watching the interaction, Hong Mungi, the Tae sect leader, is moved to tears of joy as he hears the news of their victory. He addresses the gathered disciples and hall leaders, praising them all for their hard work and for enduring through the difficult times. Looking up at the sect's sign, he reflects on the 150 years of humiliation they endured because of their perceived weakness and his own feeling of incompetence. He watches Jin walking playfully with the children, amazed that a child achieved what generations of adults could not. Standing beside the external hall leader, Jin Bayam, Hong Mungi admits that he feels both deeply thankful and somewhat ashamed. Wiping away his tears, the sect leader enthusiastically suggests they throw a massive feast to celebrate Jin's incredible feat. Jin Bayam immediately shuts him down, sternly pointing out that their meager budget can't handle such an expense right now. The two engage in a comical argument, with Jin Bayam insisting on the importance of honor, while Hong Mungi worries about putting food on the table. Finally, with a sigh and a smile, Hong Mungi pulls out a heavy pouch of his own personal funds to pay for the celebration the hall leader insists on. Everyone starts chipping in their own money to help out. Hong Mungi accepts the donations, feeling like she just went and flexed on everyone. Back at the sect, Jin So-won is greeted as a hero by the younger disciples. But Jin Bayam looks like he's about to have a stroke over the cost of a celebration feast. He stomps away, grumbling about how they can finally afford meat-side dishes for a change. Jin watches him go, relieved to see his father finally acting like his usual grumpy self. Later that day, the sun hangs high over the sect grounds. Hong Mungi gathers the top disciples to distribute the iron heart pills they got from the strategist. She hands one to Jin and one to Saryon, saving the last for whoever shows the most growth. Back in the office, the clicking of an abacus is the only thing breaking the silence. Jin Bayam is stressing over the bills while Jin stands there, casually chewing on a leaf. It turns out a merchant named Jai Yonseok offered 3 guest houses in exchange for one of the pills. He tried to act like he was doing them a favor, even though his son was a total no-show during the crisis. But the sect leader didn't budge, refusing to sell out the sect's pride for a few buildings. Jin Bayam is still fuming, shouting that those guest houses could have funded 5 pills a year. Jin just smirks, knowing his dad is actually glad the sect leader didn't give in. Sick of hearing about money, Jin decides it's time to head out. His father yells after him, doubting his kid has what it takes to actually make a fortune. Jin doesn't even stop to look back as he walks away. He's got one goal in mind, heading straight to where the money is. Welcome to the Wang clan village, a place where the air smells like wealth and the streets are paved with success. Even the travelers passing through can't help but gawk at how extravagant everything looks. This is the legendary Wang Manor estate, home to one of the top 3 merchant clans in the world. It's the kind of place that makes regular mansions look like shacks. The locals can't stop gossiping about it. Word is, the family has a daughter who's a peerless beauty. But there's a catch: no one in town has ever actually seen her face. She's like a ghost in her own home. Deep inside the estate, a man approaches a heavily sealed room. He reaches for the heavy door knocker, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway. It's Wang Jumsen, the head of the clan. He's back from his travels and heads straight to see his daughter. Inside, the air is freezing. Fresh fruit sits on a table, already covered in a thick layer of frost. Then the sound of a painful cough breaks the silence. Even the childhood drawings on the wall seem cold, depicting a world covered in snow. Wang Soso sits alone in the middle of the room, her breath visible in the frigid air. She looks up and weakly calls out to her father. Despite her pale face and sickly appearance, she forces a bright smile when she sees him. Jumsen checks in on her, asking how her day was. She tries to act normal, telling him she learned a new embroidery pattern. She shows him her work, a delicate design of green leaves. She says she wants to make him a new robe with it. Jumsen humors her, but his eyes are full of sadness. He knows the truth about her condition. Soso has the solar physique. Her body burns from the inside out, so she has to live surrounded by giant blocks of ice just to stay alive. Her father has consulted every doctor money can buy, but the news is always the same. There is no cure. All the ice in the world can only slow the heat down. Soso is sweating even in the freezing room. The doctors say she likely won't live to see her early 20s. Another fit of coughing hits her, but she keeps trying to laugh it off for her father's sake. It's almost her birthday, and Jumsen asks if there's anything she wants, anything at all. She smiles and says he's already given her everything. Hairpins, clothes, jewelry, she has it all. But then she hesitates. There is one thing: she wants to see the market, the real world outside these walls. She spends her whole life behind shut windows and sealed doors. She just wants to know what the world looks like. Seeing his face, she immediately apologizes. She calls it a selfish wish because she knows how dangerous the heat is for her. Jumsen smiles gently. He's already been working on a solution, a special carriage that can keep her cool on the road. He tells her that once it's finished, she'll be able to go outside whenever she wants. Soso is so happy she practically lunges into his arms. For a moment, the cold doesn't matter. She calls it the best gift ever, her eyes lighting up with genuine hope. Seeing her this happy brings tears to the old merchant's eyes. It's all he's ever wanted for her. He holds her tight, thinking to himself that mountains of gold mean nothing if he can't save his daughter. The sun sets over the Wang Manor, painting the sky in beautiful oranges and reds. But as night falls, the peaceful atmosphere is shattered. Jumsen enters the room later, only to find the ice broken and his daughter gone. A single letter is left behind. His hands tremble as he reads the ransom note. "We took your daughter. These people have no idea who they're messing with." He lets out a roar of absolute fury. The kidnapping of the Wang clan's daughter is an act of war. He calls for his guards and issues an immediate decree. He will pay any price and give any reward to whoever brings her back safe. A portrait of So-So is circulated across the region. The wealthiest man in the world just put out the biggest bounty in history. In the middle of the crowd staring at the notice board, Jin So-won is watching. He knows this story. In his past life, she didn't make it. He smirks. This is the opportunity he's been waiting for. Not for the gold, but for the alliance he can build. With a sudden burst of speed, he leaps away, heading toward the secret location he remembers from his past life. He's moving fast, disappearing into the woods before anyone even notices he was there. Meanwhile, back at the Taeyi sect, Ja Yeonseok is pressing Hong Mungi. He mentions a transaction from the Azure Dragon Merchant Guild that sounds a lot more like a threat. Jin So-won knows the current deal with the merchants won't last. Once they get what they want, his sect will be left out in the cold. He realizes they don't just need money, they need a powerful ally who is truly indebted to them. He needs to earn their genuine gratitude. His goal is to secure a reward so massive that even taking down the Azure Dragon Merchant Guild won't matter. He wants to wipe out the sect's debt in one move. With a confident smirk, he prepares to make his grand entrance as the hero of the story. He tracks the kidnappers to a dilapidated shack hidden in the dense forest. He's finally found her. He sifts through the crimes he remembers from his past life, filtering for anything involving young girls in this area. Most were common cases, but his perfect memory recalls one particular tragedy that stands out. It was a report of a girl whose identity was never known, found murdered near this very spot. He lands silently on the roof, his eyes fixed on the target. This is the place. He peeks inside, his face serious. He has to time this perfectly. Inside, several men in black surround the girl. He's relieved he isn't too late to intervene. But then he notices something wrong. He pauses, wondering what's happening to her. The girl is flushing a deep crimson, her body gasping as if she's being cooked from the inside. He's confused. His memories of the crime report didn't mention her being ill. This is an unexpected variable. The kidnappers panic, realizing they need to erase all evidence of their involvement before things get worse. One of them draws his sword to finish her off, intending to bury her body and disappear. Jin So-won doesn't hesitate and smashes through the ceiling, striking down the closest thug. The others are stunned as their comrade is taken out in an instant. They demand to know who he is. He doesn't give them a chance to regroup, moving like a shadow and cutting through their ranks. The kidnappers scream in pain as he dispatches them, while So-So watches with fading consciousness. With the thugs gone, he turns his attention back to the girl. She's barely holding on. He notices the ropes on the floor and the sheer intensity of the heat radiating from her body. He realizes this is far more serious than a simple fever. Her entire constitution is unstable. She groans in pain, her eyes fluttering open as she sees her savior. He asks if she's awake. So-So weakly asks who he is. He identifies himself as Jin So-won of the Taeyi sect. He lies, telling her he was just on a stroll nearby when he heard strange noises coming from the shack. He claims that as a martial artist of justice, he couldn't just ignore someone in trouble. He really leaned into the hero persona, giving her a reassuring look. She thanks him, managing to tell him her name before the pain surges again. He notices her condition worsening and offers to take her to a physician immediately. She tries to stop him. She explains that she has to stay in her ice pavilion surrounded by cold chi, or she'll burn up. If her body pushes any further, her very meridians will catch fire and incinerate her from within. Jin So-won suspected it wasn't a normal illness, but hearing about burning meridians confirms it's something much rarer. He wonders what kind of illness could possibly cause this much internal heat. He dives into his mental library, searching for any record of this specific chronic condition. He keywords his search, looking for anything related to fever and burning meridians. His mind flips through thousands of pages of medical texts he memorized in his past life. He knows there has to be a record of this condition somewhere in the vast knowledge of the Murim alliance. He focuses, narrowing down the search as he sorts through his memories at lightning speed. Finally, he finds it in the Compendium of All Diseases, written by a legendary doctor. The text describes a body that releases overwhelming internal heat, just like hers. It confirms that in severe cases, the buildup of heat will eventually cause the victim's energy channels to burn out. Jin So-eun delves deeper into his mental archives. He realizes this is no mere illness. It's a rare constitution where one is born with an overflow of internal heat. Because it's a fundamental part of her body's makeup, medicine alone won't work. It's a condition that slowly consumes the host from within. He looks down at the suffering girl, knowing that in this era there is no known cure for the solar physique. At least, none that anyone else knows. He confirms it. This is the solar physique. It must be treated as a change in one's constitution, not a disease. He realizes the gravity of the situation. Without a miracle, her life will be cut short by her own internal flame. He laments the terrible timing. Of all the conditions to be born with, the solar physique is one of the most fatal for a woman. He recalls that in his previous life, Wang Soso's disappearance led her father to spend his entire fortune on a futile search, never even finding her body. The kidnappers were caught off guard by her condition, which the Wang clan had kept hidden from the public to protect her. He deduces that in the original timeline, they likely killed her and mutilated the body once she became a liability on the verge of death. He grips his chin in thought. If he uses the method he's thinking of, he might just be able to rewrite her fate. So gasps for air, her face flushed a deep red as the internal heat ravages her meridians. She wonders who this man is. Jin So-eun addresses her calmly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. He reveals that he knows a way to fundamentally change her constitution and save her life. So looks up at him with a mix of disbelief and desperate hope in her eyes. Any chance at survival is enough for her. He watches her struggle, her hand clawing at the wooden floor as she tries to find the strength to speak. With what little breath she has left, she begs him to tell her. She's willing to do whatever it takes to survive. She promises to do anything he asks, her resolve absolute in the face of death. Jin So-eun warns her that changing one's very nature is not a decision to be made lightly. He asks her if she'd still trust him if he were a fraud. She knows he's her only hope. He's the one who defeated her captors and stood by her. Despite her youth, she claims she can distinguish between those who want to help her and those who mean her harm. He accepts her answer and tells her there are things she must understand before they begin the procedure. He recounts a similar case he read about, the story of Jade Maiden Susu, who was born with the lunar physique. Her condition allowed her to master the ice arts, but it left her cold and unable to ever have a family of her own. She sought out the legendary divine physician of life and death to find a way to change her destiny. That physician eventually discovered a method to reverse the constitutions of extreme yang and yin within the body. Jin So-eun realizes that if he reverses that very procedure, it should work perfectly for Soso's solar physique. However, he makes it clear that the path ahead will be difficult and full of conditions. She will need to take a daily medicinal pill, and once the transformation is complete, there is no turning back. Furthermore, she must cultivate the Tae heart method to keep her internal energies in check, which means she'll effectively become a practitioner of the sect's arts. Soso looks down, her voice soft but firm. She never desired the life of a martial artist. Her heart's true desire is simple, to experience the changing seasons and the warmth of an ordinary life. She dreams of a future where she can love freely and raise children of her own without being a prisoner of her own body. She just wants to grow old while living through those ordinary days that everyone else takes for granted. That is all she asks for. Jin So-eun looks at her, moved by her simple wish. Despite her clan's immense wealth, she couldn't buy the one thing she truly wanted. Her constitution robbed her of the simple pleasures of life, making her a prisoner in her own home. He decides he will help her. He agrees to the plan, but a sudden sound outside the shack puts him on high alert. Something is wrong. He realizes the real enemy has arrived. Before Soso can react, he tells her they're already here. He strikes a pressure point on her neck, knocking her unconscious in an instant to protect her. She's confused as she falls. He catches her gently, whispering an apology as she goes limp in his arms. He has to do this for her safety. He knows that if the truth about the identity of her kidnappers ever comes to light, it would put him in an impossible position. He has to handle this himself. Outside, shadows stretch across the clearing as the true masterminds behind the kidnapping gather. The lead masked man realizes their messenger pigeon never arrived and orders his men to move in and secure the hostage immediately. Something has gone wrong. The leader of the masked group issues a final, stern command. Their mission depends on absolute secrecy. They cannot afford to leave any trace of their clan's involvement. Jin So-won stands before them, his sword drawn and a smirk on his face. He mocks their lack of honor, calling out the esteemed Namgung clan for resorting to such numbers against a single opponent. The sudden appearance of a witness, one who knows their true name, sends a wave of panic through the ranks. They demand to know who has dared to interfere. Jin So-won remains composed as he lands gracefully. He isn't there for a conversation. He's there to dismantle their entire operation. The leader's eyes narrow as he realizes the gravity of the situation. If a witness escapes, it means the end for all of them. He orders his men to ensure no one leaves the clearing alive. Desperate to know who they are dealing with, he demands to know who sent Jin So-won and what his true identity is. Jin So-won ignores the question, choosing instead to reveal just how much he knows. He points out that they aren't just generic thugs, but warriors directly tied to the Namgung clan. He goes even further, identifying them as the hidden agents of Namgung Sangwon, the power behind the Azure Sky merchant group. The leader's composure shatters as his secret is laid bare. Jin So-won explains the motive behind the kidnapping, a desperate, dirty move by the Azure Sky merchant group to destabilize the superior Wang clan. It was a pathetic attempt to create chaos and gain a competitive edge by holding the Wang family's daughter hostage. He mocks their employer's lack of class, tusking at the thought of a prestigious merchant group resorting to such low tactics. Realizing he has nothing left to hide, the leader prepares to unleash his full power. With a burst of speed, the leader closes the distance, his robes fluttering as he lunges forward to strike. If their identity is known, they might as well use their signature style to finish the job quickly. They charge forward, invoking the name of the Azure Sky boundless sword art. Jin So-won's smirk only grows. He recognizes the technique instantly, having seen it many times in his previous life. He parries their blades with effortless grace. He moves with a fluid speed that makes the attackers look clumsy. He counters their synchronized attack, his eyes focused and calm. He lands a swift, sharp blow on one of the masked men, breaking through their defense with humiliating ease. The warrior stumbles back, outraged that a young man could so easily outmaneuver them. He yells out in frustration, calling Jin So-won a coward. Jin So-won doesn't let up, delivering a follow-up strike that sends the man reeling while laughing off the insult. He finds the accusation of cowardice hilarious, considering he's being attacked by a group of trained assassins while standing alone. Another attacker rushes in, desperate to reclaim their honor. He announces the second form of their secret sword art, hopping to catch Jin So-won off guard. Jin So-won barely flinches. He's almost bored by their predictability, mocking them for thinking the second form would be enough to touch him. He speaks as if he's a teacher correcting a student, narrating the flaws in their execution. He tells them they lack the necessary range and commands them to try again. The leader watches in horror as his men are systematically dismantled. He can't believe a mere nobody is so familiar with their clan's most guarded secrets. His mind reels as he struggles to comprehend how someone so young and seemingly insignificant could possess such profound knowledge and skill. Jin So-won cuts through the assassin like he's trimming weeds. The guy tries to stay cool, telling So-won he must have picked up some gossip to be acting this bold. He starts hyping up his Azure Sky boundless sword art as some kind of ultimate killing move. He narrows his eyes, convinced he's about to end this. He lunges forward, blurring into a flurry of strikes that are supposedly impossible to predict. Slashes fill the air, creating a cage of light around the protagonist. But his confidence immediately shatters when he realizes he can't land a single hit. So-won counters perfectly, sending him flying back with blood spraying everywhere. The elite squad is wiped out in seconds, leaving bodies scattered across the yard. The leader gasps on the ground, unable to believe a nobody from a weak sect just dismantled them. To his eyes, it looks like his clan's legendary sword art is literally falling apart. So-won mocks him, asking if he actually believed that Namgung's style was invincible. He looks back coldly, mentioning that the clan doesn't even know the sword-breaking form exists. With the fight over, the night air goes quiet again. He pushes open the creaky door to the shack. He reaches out, ready to move on to the next step. He tells Wang Soso it's time to start the procedure to fix her body. The isolated cabin stays hidden in the dark woods. Silence returns to the area as he gets to work. Soso starts nervously fiddling with her clothes, looking completely flustered. She looks up with a blush, shyly asking if she can call him Big Brother. He tells her they need to focus and get the treatment started. He repeats himself, letting her know they have work to do. A few days pass by in that remote little shack. Soso meditates as green energy flows through her, finally stabilizing her condition. So-won watches her, nodding that she's actually quite diligent despite her weak body. He has her chew through a bitter, specially made pill every single day. He even goes as far as teaching her the recipe so she can stay healthy on her own. They sit together while he teaches her the Tei breathing method to purge any leftover toxins. He gives her a small, satisfied smile as he sees her looking much better. When she stands up feeling energetic, he confirms she's done a great job. He beams at her and says it's finally time for them to head back home. They start walking out of the shack, ready to return to civilization. But then she suddenly stops walking. He turns back, wondering why she's hesitating. She's back to fiddling with her clothes, clearly having one last thing on her mind. She looks up with a blush, shyly asking if she can call him Big Brother. He stays quiet for a beat, just listening. She blushes intensely, worried she might have overstepped. But he just laughs it off and says he's fine with it if it makes her comfortable. He gives her a big, friendly grin and officially calls her by her name, Soso. He reaches out to give her a reassuring head pat. He realizes he's patting her head out of habit, just like he does with junior sister Hong. Soso doesn't seem to mind at all, looking up at him with a blush. He tells her it's time to head back, since her father is probably worried sick. They walk down a dirt path blanketed in falling pink petals. Soso looks around in awe, finally witnessing the spring she'd only heard about. He asks her why she's so surprised by a simple season. She explains her room was basically a windowless icebox where it was winter year-round. Now that she's free, she's already planning an autumn hiking trip. He reminds her that mountains are a lot harder to climb than they look in stories. She's not worried, since she's officially a Tei disciple now and plans to train like one. They finally make it to the entrance of the Wang clan village. She spots her father's name on a sign and points out her house in the distance. She grabs his hand, pulling him along so they can get there faster. She's already promising him the biggest banquet and reward her father can provide. The thought of endless food and music has her practically beaming. But as they approach the gate, he suddenly stops. He lets her hand slip away, making it clear he isn't going any further. He tells her he's seeing her off here, wanting to avoid a big scene. Over at the Namgung clan guest house, things are a lot more tense. San is losing his temper. The elder just sits there calmly sipping his tea while San fumes. Namgung San demands to know why the promised entry pass wasn't given to his sibling. He insists that Sunhwa is just as talented as any of the top-tier prodigies out there. He's convinced his sibling would have no problem passing the Murim Academy exam. San clenches his fist, his veins popping from the frustration of being ignored. The elder reminds him that tens of thousands from across the land apply for this. Out of all those people, only 500 ever manage to make the cut. It's a brutal trial. San glares at the old man, refusing to back down. The elder points out that he only ever promised to see if Sunhwa was even qualified. San is losing his mind because his sibling didn't even get a chance to take the strategist's test. He's told the truth. Someone way more impressive than Sunwa ended up with the pass. San refuses to believe anyone could be better than his own family. The elder sets his cup down with a heavy thud, the atmosphere in the room shifting. He gives San a terrifying look, asking if he really thinks he has the right to question his decisions. The pressure is enough to make San break out in a cold sweat and immediately apologize. The elder pours another cup, casually mentioning that the direct line is looking weaker every day. He thinks it's pathetic for a direct descendant of their clan to be so terrified of an entrance exam. It's a bitter reality. The clan is strictly split between those who keep traditions and those who handle the finance. While the direct line holds the name, the collateral branch is the one controlling all the money. That influence comes from the Azure Sky merchant group, led by a branch head who's gaining power fast. San realizes that as that group grows, the authority of the main family is slipping away. It's reached the point where they have to practically beg the collateral branch for any internal matters. And while those branch members commit atrocities under the clan's name, the direct line can only watch. Namgung San wants to know if there's any way to stop the collateral branch from gaining more influence. He reveals that his grandfather, the head of the clan, is currently researching a dangerous form. The elder's eyes widen in shock as he hears that they are looking into the sword-breaking form of their secret arts. The elder slams his hand on the table, nearly spilling his tea. He thinks it's a reckless move that could end in disaster. The tea spills across the table, showing a reflection of San's determined face. He argues that this technique is a legacy of the direct line. San looks down at the table, the weight of his family's survival hanging over him. He clenches his leg, desperate to get that entry pass so he can give his siblings a chance to restore their honor. He finally asks the question that's been eating at him: who exactly was the pass given to? The elder stays silent, his face unreadable as he refuses to give up the name of the recipient. Meanwhile, back at the village, So-So is confused by why Jin So-eun is leaving her so abruptly. She's on the verge of tears, insisting that they need to go and meet her father together. He points to a missing person poster with her face on it, explaining that the entire region is in chaos because of her disappearance. He doesn't want to get involved in any drama. So-So tries to argue, telling him that her father would never misunderstand someone who saved her life. She begs him to let her reward him, her voice cracking with desperation. He just puts his hand on her head again, asking if she's really a disciple since she already knows the mental methods. He gives her one last friendly smile, telling her that having a new junior sister is more than enough reward for him. He turns to walk away, reminding her to stay on top of her medicine and energy circulation. He waves over his shoulder with a grin, wishing her a long and healthy life. A group of villagers pass by him, looking at him with suspicion as he heads in the opposite direction. The villagers are shocked to see So-So standing there, whispering to each other in disbelief. Word spreads like wildfire through the streets. The missing daughter of the Wang clan has finally come home. So-So stands there, still in shock. Jin So-eun walks away into the sunlight, adjusting his hair as he moves on to his next destination, leaving the village and its politics behind him. Namgung San demands the academy admission token, claiming his main family needs it for their honor. He presses the elder for information, wanting to know exactly who received the pass. The elder stays quiet, refusing to give in to the pressure from the noble. Meanwhile, Jin So-eun is strolling back, bummed out that his trip to the Wang clan didn't result in a big reward. He reflects on the unexpected turn of events with Wang So-So and her rare solar body. Her condition forced his hand. He had to teach her the Tae heart method just to keep her alive. He knows that explaining the situation would only lead to trouble. With people likely suspecting, he set the whole thing up. Instead of asking for a reward, he decided to just leave and let them come looking for him on their own. He's counting on the Wang clan head being honorable enough to repay the kindness. But then again, there's always the chance he's misjudged the guy's character. He arrives at the sect gate only to find a stranger in blue robes, making things difficult for Hong Gilei. He watches as his junior tries her best to get the uninvited guest to leave. So-eun finds it amusing at first, thinking his little junior has finally started meeting men. But things take a turn when the guy gets pushy and grabs her. The stranger is stubborn, insisting he'll stay the night if he has to. So-un's playful mood vanishes instantly as he watches the man's behavior. He slams his foot down with a loud crack, demanding that the guy stop. He steps between them, telling the noble that status doesn't give him the right to force himself on anyone. So-un looked up, his eyes widening in shock as he realized who was standing in front of him. Namgung-san turns his gaze toward the person who dared to intervene. He recognizes the face. This is Jin So-un from the Taeyi sect. The heaven-opening divine dragon of the Namgung clan stands tall, radiating arrogance. Hong Gilei is just glad to see her senior brother back home. So-un is suspicious. In his previous life, this guy should have been miles away. He wonders if this is retaliation for his recent run-in with the Merchant Guild's thugs. But a direct heir like Namgung-san wouldn't bother with such petty branch family matters. This entire situation is a deviation from the history he remembers. He can't help but smirk as he realizes there's only one thing San could be after. San tries to act formal, saying he has something important to discuss. He demands to be treated like a guest, calling for a room and some tea. Underneath that calm mask, San is clearly irritated by the lack of respect. So-un isn't about to play along and tells him to wait while he goes to see his father first. Hong Gilei is dumbfounded, wondering since when her brother has been so polite. San watches him walk away, his frustration practically boiling over. The scene shifts to the main hall of the Taeyi sect. Inside, Jinbaeum is so surprised, he ends up spilling hot tea all over the table. So-un enters with a grin, bowing formally to report his return. His father and the others are stunned. This level of respect is completely out of character for him. Sect leader Jin Muon is just relieved to have him back and welcomes him home. Jinbaeum, on the other hand, is already calling him a brat for his usual attitude. A fresh cup of tea is poured as the atmosphere settles in the room. So-un begins his report, telling them about the girl he had to save and the method he used to do it. So-un bows deeply, apologizing for teaching their cultivation method to an outsider without permission. He explains that it was better to be honest now than risk a misunderstanding with the Wang clan later. Inside the quiet sect halls, the elders discuss the true meaning of martial arts. His father, sect leader Jin Muon, tells him he's proud of him for doing the right thing. So-un gives a confident little smirk. Jinbaeum asks about the reward, but So-un just mocks him for being so materialistic. He stands up to leave, ready to move on to the next task. He excuses himself, telling the elders that he already has a guest waiting for him. Muon laughs it off, though he admits he's often embarrassed by his son's boldness. But both elders are left wondering who on earth would be coming to see him as a guest. Outside the reception room, the younger disciples are all huddled together, spying through the door. They're starstruck, whisper shouting about how cool the famous Namgung-san looks. They dream about one day joining a prestigious clan like his and learning their legendary arts. Inside, San sits with an air of absolute superiority, staring down the young man across from him. San thinks So-un is incredibly arrogant, especially since most people bow their heads in his presence. He notes that every now and then someone like So-un appears, puffed up with false confidence. So-un gets straight to the point and asks if he's here for the academy admission token. San is visibly taken aback, surprised that the brat saw through him so easily. He sets his cup down and claims the token originally belonged to him anyway. He tells So-un it only ended up in his hands by pure chance, dismissing the boy's achievement. So-un finds that hard to believe. If it were truly his, why would the chief strategist have given it away? He suggests that if San has a problem, he should take it up with the strategist himself. He needles him further, guessing that San only came here because he failed to persuade the man. San's grip on his cup tightens as he tells So-un he has a real talent for getting under people's skin. So-un just laughs it off, telling the noble that his irritation is his own problem to deal with. He casually acknowledges San by his title, the heaven-opening divine dragon. He knows San is an elite graduate, and the only reason he'd be this desperate is for his sister's sake. San claims he isn't asking for it for free and offers fair compensation in exchange. He presents the 7-colored treasure pearl, a gem valuable enough to buy an entire estate. He places the gem on the table, trying to dazzle the poor sect disciple with wealth. So-un isn't impressed. He knows San is only this desperate because he can't rely on his clan anymore. San warns him that settling this quietly would be best for both So-un and his sect. But So-un finds San's fake concern for his family absolutely skin-crawling. Watching San act like a caring family man makes So-un's stomach turn. It triggers a traumatic memory of the blood and rain from his past life as a disposable meat shield. He'd rather have his heart torn out than watch someone like San weep over a scratch. San asks him to imagine the fallout if the world learned he was coveting Namgung property. So-un stares back, unimpressed by the noble's hollow and arrogant threats. It's clear that San thinks so lightly of the Tae sect that he doesn't even bother hiding it. San asks if that tone means he's officially rejecting the offer. So-un just gives a dark, mocking grin that catches the noble off guard. He reminds San that the Iron Sword sect tried to side with him before, and they ended up thoroughly disgraced. The reflection of a furious Namgung San is seen in the shimmering surface of the 7-colored treasure pearl. San is incensed, his face twisting in rage as he demands to know how So-un dares compare his noble clan to the likes of the disgraced Iron Sword sect. He stands abruptly, the force of his movement nearly upending the small table between them as he loses his composure. San clenches his fist on the table, deciding that words alone are no longer enough to settle this blatant disrespect. He officially challenges So-un, demanding that he stake the academy admission token in a sparring match right here, right now. So-un meets the noble's gaze with cold, unyielding eyes, accepting the challenge with a silent, sharp focus. A sudden clamor erupts within the sect grounds as word of the impending duel between So-un and the Namgung elite spreads. The unnamed official and other elders look on in disbelief, stunned by the audacity of such a confrontation. Disciples drop their training and sprint toward the courtyard, eager to see their senior brother face off against a legendary warrior. The air is thick with excitement as the students gossip about senior brother Jin and his chances against the heaven-opening divine dragon. Hong Gilei watches with a mixture of shock and worry, her heart racing as she realizes the weight of the moment. Jin Baeum, the external hall leader, explains the situation to a bewildered disciple as the tension in the air becomes palpable. Gilei's eyes are filled with concern as she reflects on how quickly a peaceful visit turned into a potentially deadly fight. The younger disciples cheer loudly. Their faith in their senior brother's skill remains unwavering despite the reputation of his opponent. Others are more realistic, reminding their peers that San is a high-ranking member of one of the great clans. They recall So-un's recent, near-miraculous victories over powerful foes, hoping he can achieve the impossible once again. A young student pumps his fist in the air, convinced that their senior brother is destined for another glorious win. Jin Baeum and the other elders gather, their faces grim as they prepare themselves for the consequences of this duel. Jin Baeum watches his son closely, acknowledging his explosive progress but fearing the gap between their styles. He worries that the Tae sect's arts simply cannot withstand the sophisticated techniques of the Namgung clan. San stands ready in the training courtyard, his aura flaring as he prepares to humble the arrogant young man. So-un coolly lists the stakes, making it clear that he expects high-value treasures in return for his admission tablet. San arrogantly set his own handicaps, promising to use only a nameless sword style and a fraction of his internal energy. As he begins to unsheath his blade, he warns So-un that even with these limits, he will not be holding back. So-un draws his own sword, his grip firm and his expression calm as he gives the signal to begin. The Tae sect leader and Hong Gilei watched with bated breath, Gilei gulping nervously as the tension reached its breaking point. In a blinding flash of steel, the two warriors engage, their swords clashing with a resonant metallic ring. They move with incredible speed, their blades locking as they test each other's strength in a fierce opening gambit. San's eyes widen in genuine shock as he feels the unexpected power and precision behind So-won's defense. Another powerful exchange follows, and San is forced to exert more effort than he anticipated just to keep pace. So-won mocks him mid-clash, nodding that San's face clearly shows he didn't expect the duel to go this way. The courtyard is filled with the frantic ringing of metal as the two engage in a high-speed flurry of strikes and parries. San struggles to understand how a boy who hasn't even reached adulthood can possess such overwhelming martial prowess. He realizes that So-won's strikes carry the weight of a seasoned master, forcing him to take the fight seriously. The vibrations from their blades travel up San's arm, rattling his composure as he realizes he might have underestimated his opponent. So-won presses the advantage, his movements fluid as he launches a fierce follow-up strike. San is pushed back several steps, his breath hitching as he struggles to regain his footing against the relentless assault. He admits that So-won's achievements are impressive, but he refuses to let a miracle happen twice. San invokes the full power of the Azure Sky boundless sword art, determined to end the fight in a single, decisive moment. He strikes with blinding speed, his blade becoming a blur as he aims to overwhelm So-won's defenses. So-won's perception sharpens, his eye glowing with a faint blue light as he channels his inner energy to counter. A powerful, ethereal aura erupts from So-won as he prepares to unleash a technique that will shock everyone present. The duel reaches a fever pitch as the air screams with the friction of clashing steel and erupting sparks. Every strike is met with a flawless parry, a rhythmic dance of death that leaves no room for error. Namgung-san is visibly shaken, his mind racing as he realizes So-won has successfully blocked his signature Azure Sky boundless sword art. San grimaces, his arms trembling from the sheer force behind So-won's defense, a strength he never expected from a minor sect disciple. His pride wounded, San demands to know what kind of underhanded trickery So-won is using to hold his own. So-won scoffs at the accusation, asking if San is really going to follow the same path of denial as those he already defeated. His eyes burn with a fierce intensity as he challenges San's refusal to acknowledge the Tae sect as an equal power. San clenches his jaw and his sword hilt, his voice dripping with a dangerous, constrained politeness that barely masks his boiling rage. Driven by the absolute dogma that the Namgung clan cannot be defeated, San lunges forward with a lethal, unrestrained desperation. The unnamed official and Hong Gilei are frozen by the sudden, crushing weight of San's murderous intent as it saturates the courtyard. So-won feels the chill of that killing intent, a sensation that suddenly pulls him away from the present moment. Darkness envelops his mind as traumatic memories of a past life begin to surge back with terrifying clarity. In his vision, the sound of rain and the heavy splashing of boots through blood-mudded earth replace the sounds of the duel. A younger, battered version of So-won gasps for air on a battlefield, surrounded by the remnants of a defeated army. His eyes reflect a world of pain and defeat, recalling the era when the Murim alliance was being systematically crushed by the demonic cult. He remembers the outcasts and nobodies of the Lesser Justice Squad, used as nothing more than meat shields to buy time for the elites. A solitary sword stands in a field of corpses, a grim monument to the squad that history would choose to forget. Covered in the blood of his fallen comrades and the cold rain of failure, So-won recalls his role as the captain of that doomed unit. The smoldering rage within the eye of his past self mirrors the intensity of his current, reawakened spirit. In the present, cold sweat pours down So-won's face as the phantom images of his dying comrades flicker before his eyes. The memory of a brutal strike cutting through his friends flashes vividly, the bloodstains feeling fresh in his mind. He recalls the bitter taste of his own lifeblood as he fought to the very end for a cause that had already abandoned him. He kneels over the body of a friend in the pouring rain, the sound of his name being called for the final time haunting his soul. Gripping his sword with a renewed, desperate conviction, So-won resolves to fight so that in this life, no one else has to die for him. Flashback to the meat shield days. Jin So-won is in the middle of a slaughter, eyes glowing red with desperate fury. He grips his sword tight, the blade already slick with blood from his enemies. Back then, every fight was a life-or-death struggle at the very front of the line. He grits his teeth against the pain and the sheer terror of it all. Now Namgung-san's murderous intent brings all those buried memories flooding back. For a second, So-won is frozen by the same dread that used to brand his soul. A heavy blow strikes the earth, cracking the stone right where he stood. The battlefield was always paved with the bodies of his friends and family. But he's not that same disposable soldier anymore. He's got a new life to protect. So-won snaps out of it and meets San's blade head-on in midair. San looks rattled. He wasn't expecting this kind of resistance from a nobody. Their clash sends up a massive explosion of dust and debris. The cloud hangs heavy over the training grounds as the audience waits for the outcome. The disciples, including Hong Gilei, watch with their hearts in their throats. Someone is down. It's So-won flat on his back in the center of the crater. He stares up at the sky, his green and red robes covered in dirt. But then he cracks a bloody grin. He calls San out for breaking the rules of their duel. San doesn't care about the rules anymore. He's pulling out a secret art, the sword of the Emperor. This is the Imperial King's sword technique, a move only the Namgung direct lineage is allowed to know. San drops into a stance, ditching his energy restrictions to use over half his power. The elders in the crowd recognize the stance immediately and start panicking. San is dead serious now. He's realized So-won is no ordinary opponent. San smirked. His opponent was so infuriating that he found himself pulled into the fight without even realizing it. San officially admits he lost the wager and will give up the academy token. The Tae disciples go wild. They actually beat a genius from the Namgung clan. So-won isn't done yet, though. He happily reminds San not to forget all the other treasures, too. He's practically got money signs in his eyes, thinking about that pearl and the divine pill. That 7-hued jewel alone is worth more than a massive mansion. He's hit the jackpot. He's already planning how to flip these treasures for the best price. But San isn't walking away. He says the wager is over, but the actual fight is still on. So-won's brain just reboots. Wait, what? We're still doing this. San levels his blade. He knows losing to So-won wasn't a fluke, and that makes him even more dangerous. He claims the wager items are separate from the honor of the sparring match. Without another word, he launches a blindingly fast strike. San lunges in with a cold, predatory smile. He wants blood. So-won barely has time to react as the pressure of the Imperial King technique hits him. A massive arc of blue energy cuts through the air as San swings with everything he's got. So-won twists his body, narrowly avoiding a strike that would have taken his head off. Even So-won is starting to think this guy is being completely unreasonable. San's eyes are locked on his target. He's not listening to logic anymore. They collide again, blades sparking as they trade blows at high speed. San's expression shifts to pure shock. So-won's sword feels like it's grown 10 times heavier than before. Just like in his past life, So-won was desperate to save his comrades from the slaughter. Now that same desperation is fueling Namgung-san as he fights to keep his clan's name from being sullied. Blades blur as the pressure of the duel spikes to a whole new level. The weight of the Namgung secret technique starts bearing down on the training ground. San is actually impressed that So-won held out this long, but he's sure this is where it ends. So-won struggles to keep up, his arms shaking as he parries the overwhelming force. He's searching his mind, but there's a huge problem. This move wasn't in his future records. In the mental archive of his past life, the details on the Imperial King's sword technique are a complete blank. The Namgung clan must have kept this secret locked away tighter than he ever realized. That means there's no pre-memorized formula to break this sword art. From the sidelines, sect leader Jin Muon sees his son is in real danger. Muon screams for him to stop, terrified that So-won is about to be permanently broken. But Namgung-san is past the point of holding back. He's released every bit of his internal energy. The air around San crackles with blue power while So-won huffs, barely catching his breath. So-un realizes the elite of the Murim will do anything to crush those they consider nobodies. He's always hated those who strut around with that kind of hollow, lofty pride. He looks at the great hero and sees the same arrogance that plagued his previous life. Despite his father's pleas, So-un isn't about to back down and let them trample him again. Hong Gilei watches from the crowd, her hands clasped in a silent prayer for her senior brother. A bloody grin spreads across So-un's face as he finds his second wind. San stares him down, confused why this kid hasn't just given up yet. So-un decides he's got a pride of his own to protect, the pride of a disciple of the Tae sect. San catches the look in his eyes and realizes he's finally facing the true Jin So-un. He suspects So-un has been hiding his real strength this entire time. He remembers how effortlessly So-un blocked the boundless sword technique earlier. This kid shouldn't be able to stand against the Iron Sword sect either, yet he did. San points his blade, declaring that regardless of secrets, he's taking the win. So-un just tells him to stop talking and bring it on. San smiles, relishing the challenge from someone who actually dares to push him. He lunges forward like a streak of blue lightning, warning So-un that he might not survive this. So-un doesn't need a formula from the future to deal with this. He's got his own skill. He engages, his blade a blur as he matches San's speed blow for blow. San's eyes widen as his secret art fails to immediately end the fight. So-un counters with the lesser heaven sword technique, surprising everyone watching. He's actually annoyed that San managed to react to that counter in time. San isn't just a spoiled noble, he's a genuine combat genius who adapts on the fly. Their blades meet in a massive explosion of sparks and raw willpower. The sheer force of their exchange creates shockwaves that tear up the wooden floor. San's boots skid across the boards as he's forced to dig in. He lets out a primal roar, pouring every ounce of his pride into a final strike. So-un grips his hilt so hard his knuckles turn white. He grits his teeth, refusing to budge an inch against the great dragon's fury. From the sidelines, the younger disciples' voices ring out, begging So-un to pull through. They watch the exchange with bated breath, their small figures dwarfed by the scale of the battle. "Senior brother Jin, we're cheering for you," they scream, their hope resting entirely on his shoulders. Amidst the chaos, the prayer for his victory is the only thing that remains clear. A sharp, dangerous grin cuts across So-un's face as he finds the opening he's been waiting for. Namgung San's heart skips a beat. For the first time, he feels a genuine chill of terror. The training ground erupts as the two warriors pour everything into a final, earth-shaking collision. To the juniors watching, this isn't just a duel, it's proof that lineage isn't everything. So-un is showing them that even the most basic sect technique can reach the pinnacle of power. With the lesser heaven sword technique, he is tearing through the legend of the great dragon. Shards of the intense spiritual pressure seem to crack the very air, reflecting the horror on the faces of the onlookers. In the broken fragments of the moment, So-un's focus never wavers for a single second. San's reflection shows a man whose pride is being shattered alongside his defense. The world slows down as So-un realizes he's finally crossed the threshold into true mastery. A sudden arc of crimson paints the sky, signaling the end of the exchange. Their shadows stretch across the broken floor, frozen in the split second after the final clash. Hong Gilei can only watch in silence, her heart hammering against her ribs as she waits for the dust to settle. San's purple eyes are wide and trembling as he tries to process the impossible defeat. Blood droplets hung in the air like macabre ornaments as silence returned to the arena. So-un had secured his victory by catching San, blade with his bare hands, then turning the broken shard against San's throat. So-un wipes a streak of red from his chin, his gaze cold and mocking as he asks if the great hero has had enough. Namgung San stands paralyzed, blood trickling from his neck as the weight of his failure finally sinks in.